Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to today's stream. My name is Ariana. I am the co director of the Consent Academy, an international Seattle based nonprofit that aims to promote consent as part of everyday life. And I'm very thirsty and I need to pour myself a drink. I hope you're all having a good day today. Hello, Aradin. Hello to Tibron. Um, I think I feel a little bit better than I did on Sunday. I am still definitely a bit sick. Hi, Krellin. Yeah, Seattle based, that's where we're like registered and everything. And technically the offices are, but we're international. So I'm in Vienna. Um, Today is Valentine's Day. I always forget about this holiday. Like I genuinely forget that it exists until it comes up and like I see things telling me it's Valentine's Day and I'm like, "Oh yeah, right. That's a thing." I tend to forget like most holidays exist. This is not me saying like I'm above that shit, not at all whatsoever, like whatever. It's more just that like I don't think about these things very much and my ADHD senses of time are just like it's day. It's a day. I don't know what day it is. It's a day. Time passes, I guess. Um, yeah, I also forget that the Super Bowl is a thing. Like we're gonna have a guest speaker this Sunday or a person I'm gonna chat with, and I was originally arranging it with them for last Sunday, and they were just like, "Oh, but it's the Super Bowl, so like we shouldn't do that." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess." I don't think that many people in our audience watch the Super Bowl, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Anyway, anyway, today we're going to talk about romance and friendship and why it's difficult. It's the theme we've been talking about for a little while. If this is the first stream of ours that you're watching, welcome. I do recommend going back and checking out the other videos in this series. You don't have to go all the way back to the beginning because it's like almost 50 videos at this point. But we have been talking about friendship for quite some time. Everything kind of builds on itself. Um, and yeah. So we're going to talk about that. We got a couple of memes first, some random things to talk about, and then we will dive into the good stuff. And I'm going to kind of like meander a little bit as I normally do, because there's a couple of things I really want to talk about that are sort of related to this in the sense that a lot of us look for answers to these problems. And there are tons of people out there who like to basically say that they have the answer, and most of them are completely full of shit. It's just like, there are a million YouTube videos and TikToks and stuff about like skincare, for example, how to have whatever skin. And there's all these things and all these people who will tell you on social media, probably even some of your friends who are just like, I have done all the research and like I can tell you the exact Korean beauty products that make my skin amazing. And a lot of time if you like actually get up close to that person's skin, it just looks like everybody else's skin, maybe a little bit better hydrated. Um, but most of aging basically comes from sun damage. Sunscreen is the number one skincare product that you need. You don't need all this other fancy shit. A lot of the rest of it is genetics, how good of nutrition you have, how much sleep do you get, do you drink enough water? Um, are you doing obviously rough things like constantly irritating your skin with scrubs or like showering in really hot water, not moisturizing, whatever. And then there's really good scientific evidence for certain ingredients. Um, you don't need to buy the super fancy versions. You don't need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on skincare routines or whatever. The famous and rich people who look amazing no matter their age, it's filters, it's lighting. They have tons of money for like more invasive cosmetic procedures, which will make your skin look better. But There's like one dermatologist YouTuber who like made this video that was like, this is the only dermatology video you'd ever need to watch. And he talked about these are the only ingredients that there's actual scientific evidence for where we can see measurable improvement in the quality of people's skin. Everything else is bullshit. And that's the case. Why do I bring this up? Because a lot of the time, the things that are actual solutions to the problems that we have are either things that are systemic, where no amount of individual effort in your one life is going to overcome systemic problems. There are outliers, the people who make it against all odds, but they are outliers for a reason. Two, the systemic or the solutions to a lot of these problems are not fun. They're not like a life hack. They're not some big transformative, tech bro optimization mystery. It's the same answer a lot of the time over and over again. And they require things like consistent ongoing effort over long periods of time to produce results, right? Like I don't put on an anti-aging cream on my face and expect immediately to look like a baby again, right? Like honestly, that would be terrifying, but right, like the skincare products only tend to work if you apply them every day and you keep everything else well organized as well, right? Consistent hydration, sleep, sun protection, good nutrition, etc. If you don't do all of those things, the baseline, the skincare products are going to help, but they're not going to help that much. And if you don't do any of it consistently, it's never going to be as good as it could be. So what happens is that's difficult to maintain. So people go and they look again. They want the quick solution. They want the thing that isn't going to take too much effort. And why? It's not because people are bad or stupid or lazy. It's because life is fucking exhausting for all of us pretty much all the time. There are definitely people who are way more exhausted than others. If I'm like super rich and I can pay for nannies and house cleaners and like, assistants and stuff, sure, that person can be exhausted. They have a lot more resources to cope with it than someone who does not have those resources. Life is hard. Life is tiring. It's also really fantastic and great, and I love it. But I'm trying to save you time, basically. So today I'm going to talk about shit that you probably already know. Probably you see the title of like, why don't I have friends or a romantic relationship? And you probably already know. Especially if you've been watching these streams where we talk about a lot of the systemic issues behind why a lot of us don't have friends, like car-dependent infrastructure and destruction of community identity and belonging, and no third places for us to go to, few opportunities to actually meet people. But the things that you do have agency over in your life, you probably already know, right? Like whenever people talk about like the thing that you do that's like fucking up your whole life. Well, first of all, I generally speaking disagree with the fundamental premise of those kinds of videos. Like the idea that if you're not like min-maxing and optimizing, you're somehow fucking up your whole life is complete nonsense. Life is meant for you to enjoy it. If you enjoy playing tons of video games, if you enjoy like World of Warcraft 10 hours a day, all your free time is going to that, you're doing life right. If you enjoy getting up at 5 a.m. and going running and pushing yourself in those ways, and you like hiking and the grind, cool, you're doing life right. Basically, a lot of that suffering comes in when we torture ourselves with these ideas of it should be some other way, and therefore I am some kind of failure, especially when we've gotten attached to certain ideas of idealized happiness or perfection or whatever. Okay. Krellin, you said it's also confirmation bias because people who don't have genetics to stay good looking don't continue getting chances to be in front of cameras. Exactly. And Rodden, as long as my skin keeps my insides inside of me, then it's good enough for me. Yeah, I mean, like the purpose of your skin is it's literally like the first step of your immune system, right? It's protecting you. And like, UV radiation is powerful shit, right? There's a reason why the parts of your body that makes your blood has to be inside of your bones because it's too sensitive to UV radiation and just mutates way too easily. And like your skin and your muscles and everything is not enough protection to keep it from getting completely fucked up by UV radiation. So we had to evolve for that process to be completely done inside of the bones. And yeah, otherwise we just wouldn't survive very long. Okay, let's go I have a couple memes. I have a couple of things to talk about. Like I said, it's going to seem meandering, but it does actually have a logic to the whole thing. So stick with it. I was going to draw like a heart on my face or something, and then I completely forgot about it until like after I started the stream, and I was like, oh shit, I was going to do something cutesy for Valentine's Day. But the cutesy thing is that we hang out, right? Okay. So as many of you may know, there is a controversial video game that has come out, and there are lots of hot takes about whether or not one ought to or ought to not buy the Wizard video game. Lots of people who are way more prepared than me to talk about these subjects have already made videos on it. I recommend people like Jessie Gender and Sterling. I don't remember her first name. I only remember her badass outfits. Lots of them have talked about these things. I recommend listening to what they have to say about it. And there are alternatives. You know, you can do whatever you want. No one can come in and basically tell you you're like not allowed to buy something. Thank you, Krellin. But some people might be upset with you, and they would have reasons that are completely legitimate for doing so. So, yeah. Also, like, I do want to just say, like, one of the fundamental premises of the game's storyline, not even talking about the books that's loosely based off of, is that there is a genetically, like, destined slave race that's trying to end their slavery, and your job is to help suppress the freedom efforts of slaves. Anyway, I don't know who wrote that story, but maybe they should have a think. Maybe they should have a think for a little while. But if you're feeling sad because your favorite childhood author has turned into just a person I'm going to save the adjectives, someone you just don't want to associate with anymore, there are other options. There are lots of there's lots of things that I don't like about Harry Potter, and I could spend a ton of time talking about how I liked it when I was a kid, but I actually fundamentally think it's a pretty damaging story. There's lots of fucked up things about it. Also, it's like propaganda, like loosely speaking, for certain types of neoliberal bullshit. But I don't want to get into that right now. I'm not prepared to talk about that. But if you want other alternatives, there are many good things out there. There's Ursula K. Le Guin's Wizard of Earthsea books that are way better. There are the Books of Magic by Neil Gaiman. If you want the schoolboy story, that's a whole genre that existed well before, like British schoolboy, boarding school kind of thing. That's a whole genre that existed long before the Harry Potter was written. Check that out. There's plenty of books about magical schools. Check those out. There's lots of good stuff out there. There are alternatives. And yeah, thank you, Krellin and Aradin, for putting other suggestions in chat. The Magicians, I didn't actually watch that much of it, but I really related to like the first couple of episodes. Like the rest of it didn't really keep me engaged. I can see definitely why people like it, but it didn't really do it for me. But the first episode where he's like, the main character is majorly depressed. He's like in his mid to late 20s, and basically I think is in like a psych hospital because he's got the big sad that life is so boring and it's just like something's wrong with the world. There should be something else happening. And I just relate to that. Yeah, Carlin, I've heard that the series doesn't pick up until season two. At some point, when I want to make time for another television series, that is one that I would consider watching. Um, and yeah, but I really like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. That book is also hilarious because I met a guy. I used to be friends with this person who like very much styled himself as like maybe an IRL wizard and like actually was going to unlock the secrets of the universe. Anyway, don't ask about why I make friends with certain people. And like he would say all this stuff that seemed really cool and interesting and I was very fascinated. Then I read that book and I was like, "Oh, he just read this book and thought I was never going to read it." And just like that's all he talked. Like everything he said had like deep meaning. It's just literally like shit taken from this book. Anyway. Anyway, I just really take people on their word and I like give people the benefit of the doubt and I'm like interested in actually understanding where people are coming from, even when they're absolute weirdos. Moving on. Moving on. This just made me sad. So Temple University is recently the Graduate Student Union has been striking because if you don't know this, graduate students are like a kind of indentured servant. They are the backbone of most universities' ability to get grants and funding. Most universities depend on that. And they don't really pay grad students anything. You are literally paying to do professional research. And it's rough. And like, Temple University has been punishing the students who striked by holding up their grants and shit that they got literally from outside of the university, and then also charging them tuition. So if you don't know, you should read about the history of labor movements in the United States. This is like way tamer than a lot of things when like labor has been suppressed. Usually the cops just came in and murdered you because that's one of the fundamental roles of police is to protect the interests of the owner class. But yeah, they still pretty bullshit, right? It's still pretty bullshit because this is why we like don't make a lot of these systems less exploitative, because if you actually have options, then they can't just exploit you anymore. It's, the owner class really wants us to not have options. Okay. Uh let's see here. Yeah, I think we talked about the magicians specifically in this way before, but I could just be imagining it. But I feel like we talked about it and about how like there should be trigger warnings for certain things and how some things were handled really well and some things could have been handled better, but I don't remember. Um yeah. Okay. Next. This one I'm gonna zoom in. Sorry, it's really tiny. This is like one of those heartwarming news stories that are just like covering up for major systemic issues. Man in Nebraska orders pizza for his grandmother in Florida to make sure she was all right after he couldn't reach her following Hurricane Matthew. Police and fire couldn't do it, but Papa John's got there in 30 minutes and put the cell phone to her ear. And it's like, this is not like bad that this guy did this because we have to make do. And like mutual aid is incredibly important. And also like working with the existing structures, but also like there needs to be other systems in place. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, this is a meme. It's in Spanish, but I think it's pretty easy to understand. You've got a picture of the main red car from the movie Cars, which I've never seen. And then you've got a picture of a really similar looking IRL car. And then the picture of the animation car says, auto or cars in certain animated movies. And then it just says Kerchow, which is like what this car said. And then autos in real life, the cause of 1.3 million deaths a year. And yeah, you know, I do think we should actually just ban cars. Krellin, you said, as a former Papa John's employee, I can confirm that the company would make drivers drive in unsafe conditions. One snowstorm, the store only stopped delivering because I made a stand. Yeah, I mean, that's a great example of exploitation. When people are like, oh, it's so rough outside, I'm going to just order delivery. I'm always like, you do realize though that like the delivery person is then the person who has to go out in that. Let's think about it. Okay. It's the same when people were like, oh, I'm going to use whatever grocery service so that I don't have to go to the grocery store at the beginning of COVID. And it's like, yeah, okay. But that also just means that this person who's buying your groceries is taking on all this risk and they probably don't have health insurance and shit. So I don't know. I mean, it's just like our safety and liberation and shit just can't come on the backs of other people. Like people will sometimes talk about how these disruptive tools and services are so great because they like help with some sort of systemic failure. And it's like that might be true. They might, help in some manner with some people's specific needs that society has let them down on. However, they're decidedly not revolutionary and they're not liberatory because they're still profiting on the backs of other oppressed groups of people. So, no, just so much bad discourse on the internet. Okay, continuing. I'm going to try to get through these quickly. This is a meme, and there's two of the like super beefy muscle Shibas on either side, and then the sad Shiba in the middle. And the title is You Need Eggs for Dinner, but you have none in your kitchen. What do you do? So the beefy Shiba on the left, labeled rural farmer, child, go see if Bessie has laid more eggs for us. The super beefy Shiba on the far right, urban pedestrian, child, come walk with me to the corner store to pick up some eggs. Suburbanite, who forgot to write eggs on the shopping list? Oh my God, you know how crowded Costco gets on Sunday? Never mind the traffic around Brookstream Forest Plaza Shopping Center, Plaza Square parking lot. Child, go get your shoes on. I'll warm up the minivan. And oh my gosh, we need gas now too. Guess I need to stop at the Wawa unless we want to spend an hour getting cheaper gas at Costco. Current president has raised the gas prices so much we have to wait at Costco to fill up our 49-gallon tank. There better not be any cyclists on the road or I'm going to flip. I need to get these eggs ASAP. I can't afford to lose a few minutes in traffic that isn't car traffic. Good thing I got a 7-seater minivan so people respect my size. They know who would win in a car accident. I swear to God, if Costco doesn't have eggs, I will crash this car. I am driving all the way to Food Lion and shopping with those urban Americans in those dingy apartment complexes, plus that another 15 minutes away. Oh my gosh, okay, you get the point. You get the point. It's just a good meme. Krellin, the grocery delivery thing might have worked out for the benefit in COVID if each shopper could be doing the shopping for multiple people, but that's not the way they actually work. Yeah, I mean, there were ways that like people didn't have completely nonsense ideas where they were like, oh, but maybe it does reduce risk because it's like fewer people going to the store and all this, that, and the other. And it's like, yeah, okay, but is their employer providing them PPE? No. Is there like other protections in place? No. Do they have health insurance through this job? No. And like, are they actually able to reduce the number of people who go to the store? No, they just take a trip in place of each person, as you just brought up, Krellin. So it's concentrated a lot of risk in individual people, which is not to say that like some people who were particularly vulnerable did not benefit and not completely fall off a cliff from this app existing. However, the solution is not that this app is perfectly good and above criticism. It's that we need better systemic answers to like, why is it so hard for, our aged population to consistently get access to fresh groceries? Why are there food deserts? All of this stuff. Okay, a couple of things I want to share with you. I'm going to put these links in the chat. This video called Time Management is Capitalist Propaganda is actually really good. Really good. I'm not going to watch it with you now because it's 20 minutes long, but I do want to recommend watching it. It really does look at how, the origins of the idea of time management being in factories during the Industrial Revolution and anti-labor movement propaganda, and then the ways we still like to act as though time is some kind of asset that you can just maximize, and that some people's time is worth more than other people's time. And thinking about time should be more about appreciation and, being life affirming rather than the grind and making more money. Yeah, I recommend watching this. And as this person also talks about, a lot of people will say that these videos, including like this stream, for example, is really helpful, and that they want to watch it again and again because they just get new things out of it every time. And this stream or this YouTuber does bring up a really important point, which is that a lot of the time, these sort of self-help kinds of videos might actually have like genuinely good advice, but a lot of the time it's hard to put it into practice because there's a lot of like missing structures in place that the people who benefit from that kind of advice already have, and a lot of the people who actually really need that advice and could benefit from it don't have. So if you watch these self-help videos and things don't get better, the video just makes you feel inspired and stuff for a little while, there's nothing wrong with you. It's structural problems mostly. There are things, again, that you do have agency over, but this is why I try to talk about really like concrete things like participate in local politics, go to city council meetings, and especially the city planning, advocate for more public transit and moving away from fossil fuels. Every time your town or city or whatever builds more fossil fuel infrastructure, that's just wasted money because eventually it's not going to be a thing we can use anymore. Not even just talking about like peak oil and, the net energy cliff, but a million other problems. Okay, so there are things we can actually do. And this is why I also talk about things that I try to talk about solutions that are actually accessible. And that's some of the stuff I'm going to talk about. I'm sorry, this is just like spinning. There we go. The spinning thing was getting to me. I like to talk about actual things that we can do. And steps that a person can take that are small and manageable and things that we can actually incorporate. So some of the things we've talked about in the past when it comes to things like building friendships is one, taking a little bit of an assessment of, does the structure of your daily life actually give you the opportunity to interact with your friends that you already have or to meet new people who could become friends? And if not, that's where you already need to start, because if the structure of your daily life is making it so you cannot meet people to develop friendships with them, you're not going to solve the problem of not having any friends. Same thing goes with dating. If you don't have people you could potentially date now in your life already, and you're not doing you don't have any structure or opportunity in your life to meet that kind of person, that's the first thing you need to work on. Because if you don't have the opportunity to even begin to practice these other skills, none of the rest of this advice is going to be very helpful. I mean, like, you should still listen to it because you can maybe use it later, and there are things you can keep working on while you can do some of these things in parallel. However, if you don't have the opportunity to actually meet people to become friends or romantic partners with, that is the main cause of why you don't have friends or anyone to date. Okay, so that's one of the solutions we talked about. Something else we talked about is recognizing that skills take time to get good at. We talked a lot, especially the last Tuesday's stream, about sort of like how friendship develops over childhood. And I do want to stress that I wasn't trying to say that like every problem you have as an adult is somehow rooted in just some like hidden childhood trauma. Like that's a particular philosophy of psychology that I don't actually subscribe to. Like over what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, not overdiagnosing, but just like trying to over pathologize things. Sometimes people struggle with things because the system fucking sucks and we're being put into structures that make it really hard for us to succeed. And it has nothing to do with any unresolved internal trauma or whatever. And also, therapy isn't the solution to every one of these problems. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. Some particular popular self-help type videos that people really love on the internet and the charlatans who make them, who actually like push some pretty dangerous ideas, I think. Okay, so then, yeah, skills take time to get good at. So it's not like you're going to be good at them right away. And if you didn't have many friends growing up as a kid, or you really had some very difficult experiences with friendship, you probably got a lot less practice than other people did, and it gets harder to make up that difference as time goes on. But it's not impossible. That doesn't mean that you're like never going to have friends ever in your life or never date anybody. We'll come to why sometimes people really freak out about this in a little bit, but yeah, it doesn't mean you're doomed. It just means you need practice. And one of the things that really hampers this is people will kind of work up all the courage to go and try out these things and practice this. And then they go and try it and it doesn't work. And that's so upsetting that they kind of just like give up. Remember, we talked about last time that when you try to replace a behavior with a new behavior, if that new behavior is in any way sort of punished, people tend to revert back to the original behavior. And so you want to go into this being aware of anytime you're trying to practice a new skill, you're going to suck at it for a really long time. It's not like if you've never played, the oboe before, you don't expect that you can just pick up one of the most difficult woodwind instruments that requires tremendous lip strength and just like be good at it in like 2 days, right? No, that's like probably going to take you years of really regular practice. So with any of these social skills, give yourself time. Accept the fact that it's going to be hard, that you're not going to be good at it right away, that you might have some successes and some failures and a lot of things that it's unclear whether or not it was good or bad. And you just got to practice it. And it's cool, which is why I also recommend doing things like microdosing rejection. What do I mean by that? You can microdose rejection by asking people for things that they are obviously going to say no to. Like when you're getting on a plane, ask the people in first class if they'll trade with you. They're going to say no, because why would they trade with you? However, you already know that you're going to get a no. So then getting that no is less scary because it doesn't mean anything about you. A lot of times when we get these no's, we like panic because either what we believe a yes should have done for us or what we believe about what a no means about who we are as people or some other thing that we kind of like attached meaning to it. And it starts to cause us to have this sneaky internal dialogue we don't even realize we're having. Or it just could be that we're sad we didn't get what we want. However, if you already know that the answer is like basically 100% sure you're going to get a no, and I don't mean harass people, like I definitely don't mean that. Don't like be creepy about this or weird or like, I mean, it is already kind of weird, but like you got to keep it within a tolerable limit. And maybe you will take it too far sometime and then you just update your framework for what's a tolerable limit. Okay. So yeah, just do things like, go to a fancy restaurant and ask, can I have a free meal? I'll post about it on my Instagram or whatever. Maybe they'll say yes. Probably they'll say no, leave. And why do I recommend doing this? Desensitizing yourself to failure and rejection. That'll also make it a lot easier. Now, we want to be careful here because if you already have a lot of like self-hatred, inner self-talk, if you're constantly telling yourself like I don't deserve anything, I'm bad, nobody loves me or whatever, that is also something you should work on. And you want to be really careful you don't practice this kind of thing in a way that reinforces that idea. But this is also why I think it's good to practice this, because if you have that kind of inner self-talk and then you work up the courage to go like ask somebody out on a date that you're really interested in and they reject you, it becomes really easy to like spiral out into a pretty dark place. So be thoughtful and kind to yourself. Be gentle with yourself and try to take it easy through these things. Okay, what are y'all saying in the chat? Araden, but I'm just waiting for the perfect person to show up and improve my life. Isn't that how it works in the movies? Yeah. Araden also, hey, can I have $1,000,000? Yeah, I mean, like, go to the bank and just be like, hey, can you guys just like give me some money? Do you have any spare money? Can I have some of that? Like, you know, 2008 crisis bailout money that you all got? You got any spare change left over from that? I don't know. I mean, they're going to say no, probably call you an asshole and tell you to leave, but it's good. It's good to practice. Paladin Hulk, well, asking someone in first class to trade might prompt the question of why you think you deserve that. If you can't give a good answer, you will be judged by the entire plane. I mean, a good answer is, why do you deserve it? Oh, you have money? Okay. I mean, that just tells me your whole worldview is shit. Um, yeah, no, I mean, like, don't try to rob a bank, obviously, but just, you know, the reason is because you would like it. I would like to have that experience too. You get to sit in first class. I've never gotten to sit in first class. I'd love to have that experience too. Do you want to share that with me? I don't know. I mean, try it in small ways as well. Like, you know, yeah, like going to the convenience store and saying, like, hey, do you have any free magazines that you're planning to throw away that I could have? Um, um, yeah, I was more thinking, Krellin, like spare change kind of thing. But yeah, I'm trying to be funny here. What I'm trying to say is recognize that people are going to reject you. Recognize that the skills you're trying to practice are not going to lead to success every time. And, you know, just practice a little bit of desensitizing yourself to that. And it's the same with like in our consent classes, we talk a lot about how don't ask people, okay, ask people for consent always if you're going to do something, but only try to initiate something if you are prepared to also hear a no. Because if you go into it not prepared to hear a no, if you get a no, it's a lot more likely to go poorly. So being aware ahead of time that there's a chance you're going to get a no and it's okay is really important. And try thanking people for the no. Okay. Time management is capitalist propaganda. Genuinely, yes, it is. I recommend this video. Okay. So here's what I was talking about a little bit. We've got people like this dude. I learned about this dude a few years ago through my temple because he wrote a book called In the Realm of the Hungry Ghosts, My Encounters with Addiction, or something along those lines. And people really like to talk about this particular guy as though he's like the father of harm reduction and humanizing addicts, but he actually isn't. He just gives like on the surface really seems like he is, but actually not. And one of the reasons why I say this is hungry ghosts are that's like a realm in Buddhism you can be reincarnated into that's like above hell, but not it's below animals basically in terms of how difficult it is from there to attain enlightenment. So it's not like hierarchical as in like you're better than. The realms in Buddhism are just like being born into these different realms means how easy is it for you to be able to attain enlightenment from this place. Um, and if you're in the realm of an animal, it's going to be harder to attain enlightenment than if you were, say, in nirvana or something. Like it's a lot easier to attain enlightenment when you don't have all these things causing attachments and you're not constantly fighting for survival. Okay, so the realm of the hungry ghosts is basically a place where if you're like incredibly selfish and greedy and fucked up as a person, you might get reborn into that, where like you have these really big distended bellies and a really long skinny neck and like you're constantly hungry and thirsty, and anytime you try to eat food it literally catches on fire in your throat, and also you can't swallow. And hungry ghosts are not a compassionate image with which to describe people struggling with addiction. And some of the monks really were attracted to this book. One, because they were like anything Buddhist, anything that like references Buddhism that is in the, Western speaking world is something we get excited about. But then they were also like this, because they have such a negative idea about ghosts or the hungry ghosts, they were like, yeah, this like fits my worldview about how I feel about, homeless drug addicts. And as an aside, like in Shingon Buddhism, at the very least, like every time we eat a meal, we're supposed to, at least the monks are, like set aside a portion of their food and like bless it basically so it can actually be eaten by the hungry ghosts and like it doesn't just burn up in their throats. So every time we had meals, we'd have to like set aside food, put it outside, which basically just fed the local rats. But anyway, so like I'm gonna just like take a wild guess and say this guy maybe doesn't know that much about Buddhism, but also like I still think it's not a very good thing. Anyway, I only want to show you this because you get all this bullshit, right? Like why you feel so lost. This is why you feel lost and unhappy in life. Okay, first of all, this is, number one grifter tactic, which is to say something that most people probably can relate to like try to open up some vulnerability in you. It's like, why when you go and see a psychic, they're like, oh, you must have lost someone recently and you never got to tell them how you actually feel about them. Well, most of the population at any given time can relate to that statement. People die all the time. It's painful. We lose people. We also don't tend to tell people how we really feel, or even when we do, there's always more that we would have liked to have said to them. So that's like a really easy way to make them, to give the impression that they like see some deep insight into you. And people struggle with this, right? This channel wouldn't have 3.32 million subscribers and 885,000 views in the last 4 months if people were not looking for answers to things. Paladin Huggy said, my uninformed guess would be that as an addict, they were all they were is hunger, and that it's so hard to gain enlightenment when in such a state. See, that is a more informed understanding of like what a hungry ghost might be, but like actually having read the book, it is not what this person was really saying. Basically, this guy is one of these big proponents of everything, including cancer, is actually because of childhood trauma. And if you do ayahuasca, it will cure all of your childhood trauma and also your cancer. People don't know that he goes that far a lot of the time with things like cancer, Alzheimer's, whatever disease possible, because he doesn't broadcast that viewpoint as much. But also, like, he's a really good example of a problem with, like, there are all these books out there that people love to talk about. People love the book, like The 5 Love Languages, Conflict is Not Abuse, The Body Keeps the Score, all these other books. There's like a ton of books out there. People love them. And most people have never actually read them. Or if they did, they like really skimmed it. But a lot of the time, people praise these books so much. And I'm like, I think you just read some articles about the book, because if you actually read the book, you would see that there are a lot of really not so great ideas in here. And there's some very glaring things. And a lot of the time it's racism. But anyway, so this guy, he's really popular because he wrote another book. I forget what it was. Let me look it up again. He wrote the Hungry Ghost book, but there's another book that he wrote that is like ridiculously popular. I forget what it is though. I was just looking at it. Yeah, he believes like ADHD is something that you can like just overcome. Books. Yeah, I don't remember which one of these was really popular. When the Body Says No, I think is the one that everybody likes. Um, but yeah. Okay. So he like says a bunch of stuff that is like relatable and good confirmation bias. And you can see here, like just by clicking on this, let's look at what the other things YouTube would recommend to me. Some of these things are like things I actually watch, like these German practice videos, right? I live in a German speaking country. I'm trying to improve my German. Break addiction, why you feel lost in life, destroy your bad habits, reverse aging by 5 years, question mark. When the Body Says No, caring for ourselves, something, something, while caring for others. The root cause of trauma and why you feel so lost. So he really wants to talk about like every reason why you feel lost is because of childhood trauma. It's not because there's fundamental alienation under capitalism, like Marx talked about. There's not the objectification and commodification of everything around us. It's not the loss of community and support and other methods of meaning. No, it's because, like you didn't have enough good experiences when you were a kid. Because even if he talks to you and you're like, don't have childhood trauma, he'll be like, well, clearly at the very least you didn't have enough positive experience as a kid. But the thing is that's also reducing people to a certain type of helplessness, which is to say, there's nothing I can actually do except buy this guy's therapy or get a lot of this therapy to fix anything. When a lot of the time, therapy is not the right tool. There are some times where therapy will actually make the problem worse. But even setting that aside, it's just... Anyway, okay. Understanding men and their trauma, top foods you must eat to lose weight with someone who looks particularly insane in that picture. Trauma addiction and ayahuasca, who gets sick and how to prevent it, design your dream life, stress, testosterone, and free will. I mean, all of this. Learn power thinking, how to achieve ultra high performance. Just hack your behavior. I mean, like, you're not a machine, you're a person. Ultra high performance, almost everybody who becomes these like ultra high performers or whatever are people who were born into tremendous wealth and privilege or like got lucky and had a lot of opportunities. There are so many people out there you will never hear of who worked 10,000 times harder and hit the grind even harder and did more and are smart and they just didn't get lucky and it has nothing to do with them not optimizing enough. It's not the 10 packs of cigarettes, but childhood trauma that gave you cancer. Yeah, Carolyn, I don't get sick because I'm never around people to get sick from. Simple. And I mean, but also like, if you developed high blood pressure or diabetes or something, it wouldn't be because you were like too sad. Just be because high blood pressure and diabetes are very common things for people to get. And like a lot of people get them as they get older and some of it's genetic, But he doesn't believe in genetics. He only believes in epigenetics. He thinks that things like ADHD are not heritable, nor are any other illnesses, that it's all just your fault because you're holding on to your sadness too much. Yeah, okay. So setting that aside, I really want to recommend this article from I don't really love everything on psychology today because it is very like pop psych, which is basically one of the things that we're criticizing right now. Because again, they just want to like say you can just like achieve these amazing things when I still disagree with the fundamental premise that you're supposed to just like min-max your whole life. Why am I spending so much time on this before actually talking about why you don't have romance or friends? Because it's all related. Because most of the advice out there is absolute bullshit. The actual advice that I have is very, very simple. It's mostly, do you actually have the opportunities to meet new people and become friends with people? Physical proximity and frequency of contact is one of the number one predicting factors in the development of friendship. People tend to date people that they have positive interactions with first. A lot of relationships start out of friendships. There's no such thing as the friend zone. If you're treating people like they're a prize to be won, you just go back and watch Aladdin and know that that doesn't work. Or, an asset or, the end all goal or thinking that someone's going to fix you, that's going to turn people off without them even having to know exactly what's going on. Love yourself, work on things, get good at listening. Don't try to like use pickup artist shit. None of that. Like, if you try to do pickup artist shit, you're only going to attract the kinds of people that pickup artists say every kind of person is, which is to say, probably not the kind of people you want to be dating. Well, I do have one book that I recommend, which is very controversial, but it actually does have good advice in it. Which is basically like actually make time for the people you want to have in your life, as much as you can. I remember a couple of weeks ago we talked about with friendships, like just taking the time to send some people a text message, just saying something like thinking of you, or I was just reminded of this thing we did together, or I saw this movie and it made me think of you, whatever. Just do that a couple of times a week. Send a nice message to a friend. Microdose social interactions, get some practice at things. Dates, if you're going on a date and you're not super confident in your ability to have like hours long conversation, maybe try a movie first or like a structured activity like a hike or something if you both like hiking or surfing or something where you can have good experiences together without you having to like talk and impress the person. Anyway, okay. So this article really talks about some of the ideas underlying things that are really popular today. And it's specifically looking at addiction, but it's also, I think, that this relates to a lot of how people talk about their lives. Like for a lot of people, we talk about things like being addicted to smartphones and being addicted to electronics and like video games and whatever. And those things are real. Like for real, those things are real addictions. But the solution to them is not like trying to figure out what your childhood trauma is or like doing a 12-step program or something. There are actual real solutions, which a lot of the time, the things that help people struggling with addiction the most is to focus on those systemic things like, does this person have secure housing? Do they have sources of meaning in their life? Do they have the ability to access the things that make people feel fulfilled, et cetera, et cetera? Okay. One other video I want to show you that is also related. This one's a comedy video. But there are all of these similar things here, which is like how to become a polyglot and a million different things, how to just like impress people with all these different ways. And it's all bullshit, right? Like, it's bullshit. Like, as someone who speaks multiple languages and has a degree in linguistics, specifically in language acquisition and sociolinguistics, yeah, it's not how language learning works. But why do I share this? Again, it's because there's all of this stuff on the internet that's aiming to be like, here's all the answers. Here's how to supercharge your learning. No. There are ways that are effective to study and ways that are not very effective to study, for sure. There are ways that are effective to flirt and to pick people up. There are ways that are effective but are not actually going to get you what you want. or going to create precarious or unstable relationships. Like if you go in there and start negging, and if you know what negging is, it's basically where you give someone a compliment, but then immediately slide a criticism in there, like a covert criticism. And the aim is to make people feel unsure of how you feel about them. And then you prey upon that only really works on people who are insecure in some way. So then the goal is that you make them really want your approval and thus increase their interest in you. Don't do that. Don't do that. Because, first of all, that's an unstable position from which to start a relationship. You will just create a dynamic from which you will never recover, right? And you don't want to have to keep that up for the rest of your life. You don't want to probably create a life partnership with someone who like never feels sure about how you feel about them and is always feeling like precarious there. One, because probably they're going to get tired of it and leave you, first of all. Or you're going to be with somebody who's got a lot of things going on that they probably need help with. And you then become a barrier to them getting help with those things, because one of the best ways to improve that person's mental health is to not continue to chip away at it, right? Okay. So let's talk about some things. I've got a great Twitter post here. I will also post this in the chat. I am still so sick. I'm so bummed that I'm sick still. I'm just trying to like keep my energy up, but tired. So this is an Ask Aubrey. And this person wrote, my story as the, quote, perfect guy who can't get girls and why this is so common. I'm in college. I have a 4.0. I work out every day, and I'm physically attractive. I have saved $50,000. I have hobbies. I understand finances and real estate and can provide a future, but girls reject me all the time. I am called a racist and a sexist by people at my college for seemingly existing. I'm not allowed to show emotion. I'm not allowed to ask girls out because it's creepy. So I just want to stop right here and say, like, starting with, like, I'm in college, I have a 4.0, I work out, I'm attractive, and I have all this money. That already tells me that this person is viewing romantic relationships as, like, something you get if you just, like, have the right stat points, basically, which is not true. You know, you can have all of these things and never get someone to date you. And you can also have none of these things and have tons of people who want to date you. Most of the time, people want to date somebody who makes them feel good, right? We might say these things are important. However, most of the time, what it really comes down to is, how does being around this person make me feel? And if you think that every woman out there only wants a guy who is a giga chad and has 50 bajillion dollars and drives a Ferrari or whatever, then you're going to attract people or only end up pursuing people who want that versus, you know, is that the kind of relationship you want to be in? I don't know. Or if you think like men only want people with like gigantic tits and, you know, perfect tiny body and, you know, who do Pilates all the time and have bleached blonde hair. It's, I mean, sure, that exists, but also, like, is that the kind of person whose attention you want to get? Which is not to say there's anything wrong with that. It's just that we're selling that as the end all be all a lot of the time when there's a lot more variety in there. And exactly, Paladin Hulk, my peers think I'm racist. My guy, that means you probably are racist. So just, it's not about like getting the right stat points to get you a partner. It's about, do you make people feel good and feel good in a way that's satisfying romantically to them? Because, you know, you can make people feel good and they still don't want to be with you romantically, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so you accept it and then you move on and try with somebody else, right? It's fine. And yeah, girls reject me all the time and, you know, I'm not allowed to show emotion. Okay. So I would say that it's probably not that you're not allowed to show emotion, but it's one of two things that I assume. Either you're with people who are excessively policing your masculinity, and so any display of emotion that isn't happy or angry is seen as not manly. And if you want to be able to have the full spectrum of human emotions, maybe hang out with different people. They'll hopefully eventually grow out of that, but it seems like you've moved on from that so you can have other friends. Or you are displaying concerning amounts of anger, and anger targeted towards people for whom it is not necessarily appropriate to be angry at, usually because people feel like they're owed something when they're not, and then they get angry. Like, and it's just entitlement. This is what this whole thing is. This person feels like they're entitled to a relationship because they have all the right stat points. They're probably incredibly angry because they think they're being denied something that they should be entitled to, and that's concerning, right? And this is feedback that his friends are trying to give him, and he's clearly not listening to it. Okay, I'm not allowed to be myself because I'm a toxic man oppressing woman. I mean, like, listen, I can date everybody from like literal lumberjacks, giant chest hair, big beard, like muscle dudes who are super stoic, to like the twinkiest femboy. And then that's not even talking about all the women and non-binary people I have dated. It is never about any of that. It is literally like, do I enjoy being around them? Do they make me feel good? Do I have fun with them? Do they make me laugh? Can I have engaging conversations with them? Do I feel like they respect me as a person and that I'm heard? Now, that's just me. There are definitely going to be women out there who want something different, right? We had many years ago, I was teaching a consent basics class at a library, and so a man in his 50s came in, and he was saying that he has a really hard time with consent. And I thought I knew where it was going, but I was wrong. Because what he said is he's divorced and he's finally ready to get back into the dating game, and he's trying to date women his own age because that's who he's attracted to. And consent is really important to him. And he's finding that it's difficult because the women he's trying to date want him to just like quote unquote be a man and just take. And he feels really uncomfortable with that. He really wants to check in, and he feels like he's getting these mixed signals. Fundamentally, what's going on there is they're operating with different consent frameworks, right? Consent frameworks are also things that are generationally determined, right? Consent frameworks is your idea about like by default what is or isn't normal to do in an interaction with any given type of person, whether it's a family member, a stranger, someone younger than you, older than you, whatever. And we walk around with these and we update them as we get to know individuals. This also, they change by generation, right? I see all the time people complain on social media about like young people say no problem instead of you're welcome, and why they hate that. And that's fundamentally like a consent framework shift in decorum, right? Like what is and isn't normal to do in an interaction with somebody. So the issue isn't this guy shouldn't practice consent. The issue is try to find out what the people you're dating's consent framework is, and then that tells you here's the sandbox I'm allowed to play in. So if they tell me you don't have to ask for permission to kiss me, I want you to just kiss me, it's probably not always 100% true, which is not to say that these people are being duplicitous or lying or trying to entrap you. None of us are that self-aware. But probably what they're saying is times where it makes sense to kiss me, I want to just be kissed. And that they're saying there, that's fine. With Charlie and I, for example, we both give each other absolute blanket permission. Whenever it is appropriate, we can give each other a little butt pat. However, we ask for permission for hugs because, especially for me, I don't like the feeling of being restrained. And if I'm like in the middle of a thought or I'm like on a mission, as Charlie puts it, if I get hugged in that moment, it can be really sort of disruptive. So that's our consent framework. So, it's not that you're not allowed to be a man. It's just that, like, does your consent framework for your interactions with someone you're dating match with the person you're dating? Or are you just like still trying to map on a consent framework into a scenario where it doesn't actually work? So, like, calm down. Think about it a little bit. Like, chill out. You're not entitled to it. Okay, this is obvious, right? This one's a bit more obvious, but let's talk about some other things. If you search for things like, why don't I have a girlfriend? I'm just going to recommend you don't read any of this advice. This is why I talked about all of these like bullshit things first, because there's so much on there about why you've never had a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a partner, whatever. And most of it is bad. Most of it is bad advice. Um, and most of it is just not actually going to help you to get the things that you want in life. Okay, so what will? Um, well, the first one is, again, do you have the ability to actually meet people for whom you could date? Are you regularly interacting with new people? If the people around you have not given you interest and you don't, nothing's happening there, well, that's okay. You can like, uh, yeah, exactly, Rod, and especially from sites like Called Supreme Men or Truth Hurts, right? Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, don't do it. Just don't do it. I mean, like, I can see why it's appealing because we feel a lot of the time we see that and then we think like, oh man, like I want to be whatever is this idealized version of a man, and they're going to give me the secrets to being like them, because I also believe in, meritocracy, and that like if I just work hard enough, everything should be open to me. And it's just not like that. Okay, so are you actually meeting people? Two, are you treating people like a prize to be won, an asset to be had, a thing that you are owed? Or are you so desperate for meaning, companionship, closeness? You want the girlfriend in the oversized pajamas to snuggle with on the couch while you both play games on your Switch, whatever, that you're like so desperate for it that you're putting all of your eggs in one basket right away. Right. Like there's a Netflix show called You, and it's about like a stalker guy. It's an interesting show in the sense that it's like kind of a thriller and there's always drama and it's always like, oh, what's going to happen next? But he makes that mistake. He'll meet a woman, immediately start creating a like fantasy straw man of that woman, and then gets disappointed when she doesn't live up to his image of her and then usually kills her. And Yeah, exactly, Paladin Hulk. The main draw of finding a partner is that you never have to meet new people again. Again, that's also like this is why that is a good point you bring up, Paladin Hulk, because sometimes you manage to get a relationship and then everything kind of seems to go downhill and they break up with you and you don't know why. And it's like, okay, but did the second you get the relationship, you stop doing all of the things that this relationship was predicated on? So like if people put in their dating profile that they love like being outdoorsy and hiking and shit because they think that's what people want to hear. So then you start dating someone and you go on a lot of hikes together and you do all this stuff, but you actually don't like hiking. And then once the relationship is like long term and you don't want to hike anymore, well, that person's going to be like, yo, I thought we were going to be hiking every weekend for the rest of my life because like that's what I want. If you do the sort of bare essentials of taking care of yourself, like wearing clean clothing that looks, presentable, showering regularly, brushing your teeth, wearing deodorant, eating healthy, getting some amount of exercise, and you only do those things for the sake of attracting a partner, and then you stop doing. This has been like one of the things that has been a regular annoyance in people I've dated is like I will get into a long-term relationship with people and their hygiene will literally fall off a cliff. And I'll just be like, yo, you smell disgusting. I do not want to kiss you right now or be anywhere near you. Why are you not showering anymore? And they were like, why are you so shallow? And I'm like, maybe I don't want to get a UTI, okay? Like, uh, you go take antibiotics every time we have sex. Let's see how you enjoy it. So yeah, it's just these things make it's shooting yourself in the foot, right? Relationships take consistent investment. That's what people mean when they say they take work. You actually have to be invested in them. So one of the core things, okay, take good care of yourself, be hygienic, love yourself, respect yourself, like honor yourself, put yourself in situations where you're going to meet new people. Don't treat people like they're a prize to be won or they're going to save your life. Be honest about who you actually are. If your favorite thing to do on a Sunday is to sleep in until 1 and then roll out of bed and play video games for 10 hours, find someone who also likes that. I love video games. There are so many people out there who will love to do that with you. But if you want to spend every weekend, backpacking or hiking or, going to the gym, well, then try to find other people who like that too. Or be comfortable with having different things that you interact with together. You don't have to be you don't have to be like clones of each other. That's the other thing, is sometimes people look for someone who's like a clone of them, and that's not good. Okay, so then the number one other thing I recommend doing is getting good, actually good at active and reflective listening. If you make somebody feel like they are literally the entire world because you are really good at listening to them and attending to the conversation with them. I don't mean creepy, like leaning in, big eyes open, being like, yeah, okay, tell me more. And like, and then what? And remembering every little detail of the conversation. That's not what I mean. I mean, like, actually listening to what's at the core of the thing this person has just said to me. How can I elicit more from them? How can I show them that I'm actually paying attention and I'm actually interested in what they have to say? And then I'm also not faking it, but I'm working on this skill because I really want to get to know this person for who they are as a person. That is sexy, right? That is, now sometimes this does not lead to romantic relationships because sometimes that provides for somebody what they need in a more fundamental way, which is community and friendship. We like to think of romantic love as like the end all be all for like goodness and belonging in our lives. But in reality, the foundation is, generally speaking, community, identity, and friendship. And so if people are really struggling with that, being good at these things provides that as well. And so it might not, people often tend to do better with finding romantic relationships when that is satisfied, which is why sometimes people can be like, oh, I came in and I was so good to this girl and I listened to all of her problems and we talked about all this stuff and like she said we were so close and we had this great connection and now she's dating some asshole. Why do the good guys always lose? Well, it's because you provided something to this person that they desperately needed. And it's also the thing that allowed them to have the like support and resources to pursue other relationships. And also, they just weren't into you in that way. That's fine. They don't owe you anything. Friendship is not a consolation prize. Okay, so being a good listener, Paladin Hulk quote, hang on, I'm an attentive listener and I want to record what you just said in the file I keep on you. Yeah, I mean, like, that's creepy, right? Don't do that kind of thing. Don't be like the guy from the show You. Because he does this thing where he also immediately puts all of his eggs into this basket. And he's just like, oh, I've never loved anybody like this before. Oh my goodness, you, I'm obsessed with you. And then 6 months later, after he's murdered that girlfriend, he's on to the next one. I mean, it's popular. One, I mean, because the main actor and almost everybody on the show is very good looking. So, there's that. But then it's also fascinating because it's also an indictment of the, Twilight obsessive love thing, because it shows you, hey, someone who's this obsessive is probably going to kill you when you don't live up to their dreams. Krellin, the myth of the friend zone exists solely because people trying to let others down softly by saying they don't want to ruin our great friendship instead of saying, sorry, I'm just not sexually attracted to you. Yeah, I mean, I had this experience in college. So I worked at the like IT department of my university, and I got that job not because I was like particularly good at computers, but because I was good at explaining things to people and customer service, which is what most IT actually is. I knew a decent amount about computers. I learned more on the job, but like most of the kids who came in from like comp sci got fired because they had no patience for dealing with like, the 80 something year old professor using dial up who needed help setting up their mail client. I did. Okay. So one day I was going to dinner with a group of them, and it was like 8 guys and me. And one of them told me that they wanted to call me out because I was a huge bitch because clearly within minutes of meeting every single one of them, I had already friend zoned all of them. And like that was the first time I'd actually even heard the term friend zone. And I was like completely new to this idea. And I was like, what? It was very intimidating, one, to be like alone walking in, going to dinner with like these 8 guys and then being like, yeah, you're a huge bitch because you're not gonna fuck us. And when they explained it, they were like, within minutes of meeting us, you probably decided whether or not you would ever fuck us. And I was like, actually, I hadn't, but for sure I'm not going to now. Because like that's not how I operate. I, generally speaking, develop an emotional connection with somebody or an intellectual connection with somebody before a sexual interest develops. I do also sometimes have the like, you're so hot, don't say a word to me. I don't even want to know your name or it might ruin it. Let's just have a one night stand and then never talk to each other again. But, I kind of am in these two extremes. But also at that time, I was literally dating a woman, and I was just like, okay, guys, well, here's my girlfriend, and yeah, that was weird and uncomfortable, and I'm really not still friends with those men for these reasons. Aradin, you said, well, sadly, I imagine that a lot of that comes from women feeling that if they don't let them down softly, they could be assaulted. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, that's also the message that we get all the time, which is like, don't trust men because they're all actually dangerous. And if something does go wrong, it's your fault because you trusted the wrong man. And that's not how I am about things. I let people down gently, not to out of, generally speaking, there are times where I'm like, okay, there are red flags here, and I'm kind of worried about my safety. Like in that situation, I was just kind of like, whoa, I just kind of realized that like this could be not the safest thing in the world to be hanging out with these dudes. It's really intimidating. Which I said to all of them. I was like, y'all, that was kind of fucked up. Like when we actually got to the dining hall and sat down, I was just like, so we need to talk about this thing. But I generally let people down gently because I don't want to hurt people, but I'm always honest about it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So being a good listener, one of the things that means is responding to emotional bids. Emotional bids are an idea that was created by the Gottman Institute. Sorry, I've got my night mode on, so you can't really see this very well. I'm going to post this in the chat again. The Gottman Institute has some pretty good stuff on romantic relationships and how to make things work in the long term. So, what is an emotional bid? And this can be a thing that people also do in friendships and family situations. But let's just read this a little bit. So, happy couples turn towards their partners approximately 20 times more than couples in distress during everyday non-conflict discussions. Newlyweds who were still married 6 years after their wedding had turned towards each other 86% of the time while in the lab. Those who were divorced 6 years later, however, had only turned towards each other 33% of the time. So they're going to explain what turn towards means, I think. Every time you turn towards your partner's bids for emotional connection, you are making a deposit in what John Gottman calls your emotional bank account. I don't love this way of thinking about it in particular, because there's a lot of reasons. But the main thing is the underlying idea I think is still good, but I don't think of it as an emotional bank account. You add value to your account when you create and build on positive moments between yourself and your partner. I like to think that you're just investing in creating more trust and more resiliency in your relationship and creating structures, creating a sense of like we're on a team together to yeah, to make it so that you feel like you can actually be there for each other. Because, you know, at the beginning of relationships, there's often this like particular period where like, you know, you feel out of control and so in love and you're so attracted to each other if you experience sexual attraction, and it's all just like, yeah. And then over time, usually 2 years on average, it slowly shifts to being a different kind of love. And that's often either when people break up or relationship difficulties start to rear their head. But if you've laid the groundwork of a lot of like, we're on the same team, we've communicated, we've worked through things that may have been incompatible about with each other, or, you know, we found that we have a lot of compatibility, then you tend to set yourself up to actually have really great long-term success together. However, a lot of people don't do that. And a lot of people like ignore the things at the beginning of a relationship that should have been indicators of we might not actually be that compatible, right? Like if you go on a date with somebody or you're meeting someone and let's just say you think someone's attractive and you're like, oh yeah, like I want to try to date that person. And let's say you really want kids and you want to like, you know, live in a big city and have a dog and you love hiking and shit. And this person, you're talking to them and they're like, oh my gosh, I hate children. I never want kids. Keep them away from me. Also, dogs are the worst. It's chinchillas only for me. And I need to live in a cabin in the woods. Probably you shouldn't try to date that person, right? Like it's okay to be like, okay, this person's hot, but it kind of killed it because I heard all these things. And obviously that's a bit more like obvious, but if we have really fundamental incompatibilities on our baseline, like how we approach the world, how much reassurance we need, how much connection we need, how, you know, all this other stuff, there's some amount of incompatibility that's manageable, but too much gets to a point where it's like, it's going to be hard to maintain that. But people get afraid of actually asking these questions and answering them honestly because they're afraid of in the early days of the relationship just being like, you know what, you seem really cool, but I don't think this is going to work out. I have done that with people. Sometimes people respond really well because I'll usually explain why. And they'll just be like, yeah, now that I think about it, like, you're chill. We had good sex, but also, you know, we fundamentally want different things. You know, like they wanted to go run ultra marathons and work on sports cars and like thought that ever spending money on any of these things that were very important to me was completely ridiculous. And I was like the exact opposite. Okay. Krellin, you said, here's a better framework to remember. February 14th, today, in 1779, James Cook was killed by Native Hawaiians after trying to kidnap their king. Yeah, I mean, that is a good one to remember. So basically, this is the idea of emotional bids is when somebody wants to connect with you. I know we've talked about this on the stream before, but somebody wants to connect with you. They might not even realize they want it, right? This is not people trying to play games. Sometimes people think about this of like, why don't people just say everything directly? Like, I want your attention right now. Well, a lot of the time, we're not even aware of this. This is not just like neurotypicals doing their thing of like having weird unspoken expectations. This is 90% of it is people aren't even aware of the things that they want. But if you do not respond to those emotional bids ever, keeping the connection or deepening the connection becomes very hard. So an example of an emotional bid might be like if your friend says something like, hey, there's this new movie out. Have you heard anything about it? they might not actually just be asking, literally, have you heard anything about it? They might be wanting to see, do you want to go see it with them? This is so actually responding to that. Just say, like, no, are you interested in seeing that movie? Opening it up. You don't even have to like try to intuit this. It's just practice good, active, and reflective listening. Just actually engage with what they've said and then elicit more information from them. Again, this doesn't have to be like, mind magic, whatever. It can literally just be, hey, I'm hearing what you're saying and I'm going to ask for more information. I want to know. Tell me more. That can often be enough. And the other kinds of emotional bids are things like in times of stress, do you focus on like, I need to fix this by myself, but the other person is standing in the way? If something goes wrong, do you really focus on, I can give an example from the other day. So I have a treadmill I bought off of Amazon that I put under this desk because I work from home. I have to be at my desk a lot of the time during the day, and I want to get more physical activity and just build it in. So I have a treadmill. I don't use it all the time, and currently it needs more like treadmill oil, so we've put it aside. And we were cleaning, and I needed to put it somewhere. And so I leaned it up against this. It's meant to be able to stand up to lean up against things. So I put it next to this bureau and behind this door over there. I'm not going to show you because it's too complicated to move my camera right now. And I said to Charlie, like, this will be fine here. Just, we have to be careful if we open up either of these doors because it could knock it over. I knew as soon as I said that in some ways I actually increased the risk of it knocking over because, like, Charlie would have no reason to open either of those doors. And yet it got knocked over because Charlie opened one of the doors and the thing fell. Right? So if I, in that moment, got really angry at Charlie and I started to use, these cognitive distortions of like, why do you always do this? Or why can't you ever do that? That wouldn't have been good, obviously. But if I also got really focused on like, I knew you were going to make this mistake. Like, yeah, I kind of knew that, but like, that's not the point. And like, I don't have any emotional investment in it. It was more just like, I have a general awareness that both Charlie and I are incredibly clumsy people. And we tend to not be very good at being careful with things. So we don't buy that many expensive things. This was not an expensive treadmill. It was like really not. And we got it on like a super sale and it's fine. So if I had in that moment, instead of just being like, oh, Charlie, are you okay? And also like then saying, okay, let's check, make sure the treadmill's okay. And let's find a better spot for it that's less risky, especially now that we've cleaned up the room. We don't need to keep it here. Everything seems fine. Let's just find a better spot for it. That is also me turning towards Charlie. That's instead of me being like, you're the source of my problems and you're standing in the way of the solution, I'm saying life happens. I'm more focused on having the best possible relationship with Charlie than I am about, what I can imagine somebody being really focused on wanting to, keep track of some points or something. I don't know. I can't even really think about it because I don't really think about things that way, but I have encountered a lot of marriages where I'm just like, damn, you two act like you're playing a competitive game with each other and like do these weird little like passive aggressive things that often stem from not paying attention to the original emotional bids. So like, for example, if I really wanted certain types of things to be clean, like this, let's say I have this desk, for example, and we don't have a TV, we don't have a good couch, we have these computer chairs, we've got this desk, and we've got these monitors here. So Charlie and I do spend a lot of our free time here, and we play video games here. Like this is a really good computer for gaming, and Charlie's got a good laptop for gaming, and we like to sit next to each other and we game. And what often happens is my desk gets really messy as a result. We leave things around. And I don't totally love it, when I come in the morning to start work and there's like everything left over from our evening the night before, and then there's stuff that Charlie brought there and I have to kind of move it all, but it's not a big deal. But let's imagine it was a big deal to me. Right, it's something that takes me like literally 2 minutes to deal with. I just like move some things off the desk back to their little spot, and I take some things to the kitchen. And like every morning, regardless, I wipe down my desk because my cats walk all over this thing, and they're always in their litter box. I wipe it down, and I like wipe off my keyboard and mouse and stuff. But let's say it did matter to me. If I had asked Charlie, say, a couple of times, like, hey, would you mind helping me, clean up in the evening? Can we do this thing? That is still pretty direct, but it's also me saying, hey, this thing is important to me. And if Charlie just ignored it, maybe this one isolated thing wouldn't be a problem, but if that kind of thing built up over time, that would be really difficult because I would then likely start to feel like a lot of these small needs I have to feel at home in my home or not being met. Now, the other side of that is Charlie's got his own thing. So let's say it was important to me and Charlie also had more severe ADHD than he does, or was like incredibly stressed from his job and like couldn't do any of these things. We would need to balance that, but we would need to approach it from the perspective of we are on the same team. We want sharing the space together to be as nice for both of us as possible. We want to have the best relationship possible. So instead of being like, I need you to always clean everything and put everything right back, otherwise I'm going to be like your mom and picking up after you all the time, I would have to say, you know what? Let's think about together, what are some really simple solutions we can make? We can talk about what are the drop zones in the house? Where are the things where we just like come in and we put stuff down? And can we, instead of creating a bunch of extra steps, this is also like an ADHD tool, right? Like if you constantly come in and just like leave your shoes out and your jackets everywhere in your bag and like the front entryway is always a mess, well, getting a bunch of cabinetry is actually not likely going to be the thing that helps because the more you have to add extra steps, the more failure points you had. So instead of creating like this big cabinet, get some hooks. So at least it's off the ground. And you can have some hooks for your bags and some hooks for your jackets. And so it's right there, all instead of putting it on the ground or on a chair, you're literally just putting it on the hook. It's not actually an extra step. And you keep it right in the same space. So I might say to Charlie, okay, messiness is making me really stressed out. So let's figure out ways that we can sort of manage this. So, and I might need to pick a couple of things that are important to me. Like if my desk is really important to me, that's what I'm going to focus on. Okay, so that's not exactly talking about like how do you get a date. This is a little bit of like emotional maturity, communication skills, keeping a long-term relationship. But what it is these same kinds of bids happen in our everyday life where people bid for connection. The person sitting next to you at your desk at work who reaches over and wants to like make some joke about something they saw on the news is not actually trying to say that the news is the most important thing or it's the most interesting thing. It's a bid for, I want to connect with you for a moment. Let's acknowledge each other's existence. Small talk is not holding someone conversationally hostage. It is, like Rick and Morty might make you think, small talk is let's have enough positive interactions with each other that are low stress and low stakes, build up trust, and acknowledge each other's existence for a little while. Right? I used to be the kind of asshole who was really just like, I can't stand small talk. I just want to like, literally like the joke of like, as soon as my partner gets home, be like, do you think free will is real or not? Like if Charlie were here, he could attest to the fact that it is genuinely how I often the philosophy of free will. I'm a semi-compatibilist. I think free will mostly only exists in spaces of metacognition. But I am like that. I'm that kind of person. And I also realized it made me really exhausting to be around. And then I also started to practice being better at small talk. And I was like, damn, this is actually kind of nice sometimes. Just kind of talk about nothing and enjoy being in each other's company and just like chit chat is nice. It's less pressure and my brain gets to rest. And bids for connection, right? Do you actually want to connect with these people as people? Or are you waiting for them to be interesting and entertain you? Do you actually want to connect with people because you respect the other person and as an individual? Or are we just kind of writing everybody off because they don't meet something? This is the other thing that gets in the way is like we shoot down potential connections and friendships because they don't meet some image that we have of what it should be like. We think about the ease that we had with, say, friendships in childhood, and then try to map that onto the beginnings of friendships in adulthood. And when that ease is not immediately there, we think that there's something wrong or this isn't going to be a friendship or a relationship. When in reality, if we went back and looked at how we felt at every stage of the friendships in childhood, probably there were still times where it wasn't this immediate ease. It took time to get there. I know this is a very meandering day, but it's because all these things are actually really linked. And what I'm really trying to say is that, you know, there are actual things that we can do to increase the likelihood of getting romantic relationships or friendships, and it's not to become a Giga Chad. It's not to get plastic surgery. It's not mewing. If you don't know what mewing is, you don't need to look it up. It's not like, simping for Elon Musk. It's, do I actually have the opportunities to meet new people? Am I taking care of things like my basic hygiene? Am I, nice to people? Do I actually interact with them as people? Or, just kind of like expect them to perform for me? Am I a good listener? Do I make people feel good? And, if you are interested in somebody and you're doing all these things and they're not interested in you, they're not interested in you. It sucks, but, look somewhere else. You might think, okay, I was really nice to this person. I was there for them. I listened to them and they just didn't want me. I need to just like learn how to be more confident or something. Maybe your confidence could improve. I mean, or maybe that person wasn't right for you. If you're not the kind of person who's like going to be cavalier with certain things and like making all the jokes and being the life of the party, that's okay. You can meet somebody who's not into that, right? Krillin, what? What I'm really trying to say is I hate sauerkraut. That's all I was really trying to say. Oh gosh, Aradin, it is also probably because a lot of more typical suggestions around dating and romantic relationships are crap, and all the stuff you were talking about are the actual things that help. Yeah, I mean, like, it's true that people can be shallow. I'm not going to pretend that they can't be. There are definitely people out there who want the Giga Chad millionaire, whatever types, but gotta ask yourself, is that the kind of person you actually want to date? Or do you want to date the like cute nerd who wants to stay home and play video games with you? Do you want to date the guy who's, gonna be like the person on the cover of the romance novel? Or do you want to date the person who's like level-headed and will be a good life partner and will not leave every aspect of housework and child rearing to you? Good questions to ask. I know my dad, for example, likes Charlie very much. And also, I know that Charlie is way more effeminate than my dad would maybe love. There have been some times where like my dad made like subtle suggestions. He's not like an asshole about it, but like subtle suggestions to push Charlie in more like typically masculine directions. But Charlie's who Charlie is, and I like him for who he is. And, I would much rather be with somebody who's makes me feel good to be with, is a good life partner, actually shares responsibilities with me, is there when I need them, is understanding, is vulnerable with me, actually listens to me about the things I do and don't like in bed, but is also like down to try things and we can like see, do we like this or not? And, is trusts me, and we actually have, like, we've been talking about trying to have a kid, and we've spent a lot of time really talking about what does that look like? How are the responsibilities going to be divided? And are we both cool with that? That is way more important to me than like, does this dude have a yacht? And like, does this dude, have short hair and muscles? I mean, like, muscles are great, but also you're gonna get old someday. So it's much more about like, how do I feel interacting with this person? Um, Krellin, you said that is how the song Albuquerque by Will Alex after 11 minutes of meandering storytelling. I feel like I've never heard that song then. I really like Weird Al, but I have no memory of that. I will have to listen to it. Aradin, there is often a difference between what you think you want and what you will actually enjoy. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the same with like, I've talked about this a lot, but I think that the book series and the Netflix show Shadow and Bone is really interesting to me. One, because the story is fun and it's magic and it's cool and interesting, and it's also about like technology and changing power structures and minorities that can be oppressed or not and whatever. But there's this whole like 1,000-year-old dude falling in love with the young girl. There's the love triangle. There's like the good hometown boy that she's always wanted but never seems interested in her. And then there's the like cool, dangerous darkling who's like cool and powerful and dangerous. And like, yeah, it's full of tropes. But there's also all of this like subtly BDSM things. Like he literally puts like a magic collar on her and like control her power and like sense wherever she is. And I'm just like, okay, the person who wrote this book is definitely at least a little kinky. And it's fascinating to me because, well, it's a very interesting story and there's plenty about it that can be very titillating and enjoyable. I got 10,000% no. I would not like that kind of situation IRL. That would suck. It might be like fun for like 10 minutes, but the second a person wants to control like anything about my actual life and my actual autonomy and my ability to make decisions, say about like medical things, I'm not going to enjoy it anymore. And like I've been close to people who are very controlling, and it's not actually nice. But people sometimes get the mistaken impression of confusing what someone wants in fantasy with what someone wants in reality, right? I'm able to watch Shadow and Bone and be like, oh man, that actor is really good looking, and like as this character is like really attractive, and this is really cool. But like that's fantasy, right? It's entirely fantasy. And Aradin, you said, have you seen the Shannara Chronicles? There are a number of people, I'm sure, that are kinky that wrote and directed it. Yeah, I mean, like, there are a lot more kinky people in the world than I think a lot of people, especially vanilla people, realize. But I will have to check that out. I have not seen it. But people make the mistake of thinking that what someone might like in fantasy has anything really to do with what they want IRL. What I might enjoy in a daydream or pornography or in a book or in like, something is not actually what is going to give me the life that I want. The life that I want is I want a partner who thinks of me as a person and treats me well and actually wants to be on a team with me, who makes me laugh, who I feel like I can be myself with. Like when Charlie and I are really interacting with each other, we're just like constantly giggling and cracking each other up, and it's great. And we also like, this past weekend spent like 4 hours fixing our dishwasher together and like scrubbing all of the lime scale out of the whole thing because it had like clogged everything up. And That was great. I loved it. I loved having someone to do that with. So, what does this mean? It means work on those skills. Work on your ability to communicate well, to actually get some self insight, understand what it is you actually want and why you want those things, and become good at listening. Work on managing things like anger and try to figure out, do you have entitlement hiding inside of you? Work on the stuff that makes it so that you wouldn't be enjoyable as a life partner. And also, like, if again, I just really want to stress this, the biggest barrier that a lot of us have towards making friends or having romantic relationships is I don't put myself in a situation to ever actually meet somebody. If you never have the opportunity to actually meet people, it's not gonna, the situation isn't gonna change, right? Okay, so let's look at another article, 7 ways people bid for connection, because this is also an way that people indicate interest in each other. Sharing stories about our day, a child telling a parent about an injustice that happened at school today, a man telling his partner about how annoying his boss is, a girl telling her friend how frustrated she is with her boyfriend. Whenever we share a story, regardless of what type of story it is, we are making a bid to connect. We hope to feel heard, understood, valued, and supported. Right there. So, like, you have somebody you're interested in, and they're just like talking about something that you have zero interest in, and you can't follow it at all. That doesn't mean you tune out. That means this person wants to share with you on some level this thing they're interested in. And figure out how to make it interesting for you too. Ask them questions that you actually want to know the answers to, which might be something along the lines of, what is it you actually like about this thing? What got you started in this? I'm curious about this person as a person. I might not care about, like, their particular collection of, like, the Slavic translation of Yu-Gi-Oh cards or something. I might just be like, okay, cool. But I might be like, okay, why do you like it? That's interesting to me. Okay, grasping for attention. Hey, did you see those new flowers that the neighbor planted? Oh my gosh, look at that dog. It's so cute. Mom, look at this YouTube video. Rarely is it the flower, the dog, or the YouTube video that's important. Rather, what matters is the way we respond to their bid for connection. So this is also like when people want to share something that's giving them excitement or pleasure, it's because they want to connect with you. They want to share the excitement or pleasure with you, and it's a bid for connection. Sharing accomplishments. When people share their success stories with us, look at the drawing, article, cake, dish I made, they are trying to get us to validate them. They would like us to recognize what they did and, consequently, recognize who they are. So I have a really good example of this and it going wrong. I was sharing with somebody I was developing a friendship with that I was planning to write some articles about something for our Patreon, and one of the ones I really wanted to work on was talking about, my particular analysis of the movie Alien and feminism and consent in it. And I was really excited about it, and I thought it was something that they were going to want to talk about too and be into. And my friend responded by saying, you're definitely not the first person to have taken that perspective. And that definitely killed a lot of the potential of that friendship, because this wasn't the only time they reacted that way to things. But when you shut down somebody's, shutting people down in that way in general is a bitch ass move. It's not very kind, but it also is a way to signal, I'm not interested in connecting with you. I'm not interested in connecting with your ideas. I'm not interested in connecting with this thing or that thing about you. And it could be other things, right? There could be other layers like jealousy or feeling threatened, or, they have some other reason for disliking it. But at the core, it's still saying, I'm not interested in this connection. And that sucked. And it really, it did result in, I didn't actually write that article because it hurt my feelings. And then I was like, yeah, I don't really feel like writing that article anymore because I'm a sensitive person. It didn't stop me from writing other articles, but I was kind of just like, okay, yeah, sure. And so sometimes people can feel that when someone is sharing like a project they're working on or something they're excited about or an accomplishment, they can get a little too focused on like the realism of something. Like if someone is trying to tell you this new project they're starting on and they're so excited and you know they start a million projects and they never complete them, so what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And probably not completing the project doesn't even defeat the point for this person. For a lot of people, it's the imagining, the planning, and the initiating that is what is satisfying. And actually seeing a project through to its end does nothing for them. Or, requires tools that they don't have and they don't want to develop or don't have time to develop or whatever. So shutting them down, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to benefit that relationship in any way. That doesn't mean you can't be setting a boundary. This could be an exception. It could be a situation where you might say, hey, you always use my money for this. Please don't start another project and spend more of my money. I don't have the ability to afford this. But you don't want to shut them down in that moment. What you should say is like, oh, this is really cool. And this reminds me, at some point, I really want to talk with you a little bit about, how we split up finances or something. Way more reasonable. Or you might not even bring it up at all in that moment. You might just let them enjoy the feeling. And then later you say, hey, this thing we talked about earlier got me thinking we should have a conversation about this. And you can give it some time. It's cool. Sending a post or a link. This is one of the most common things I see in our digital era. Sharing a post or a link sends the message of, I saw this and thought of you. By sending it to you, I'd like it to share it. It's an indirect way of connecting with someone else and sparking a conversation. Regardless of how trivial it may seem, the hidden message is extremely powerful. Aiming for a hug or physical affection. When someone reaches out to hug someone or give them a squeeze on the arm or a pat on the back or some other means of physical contact, they're expressing their need to feel connected. Talking about a common interest. This is the IRL, in real life version of sending a post or a link. Talking about a common interest, whether it's sports, music, film, politics, or culture, is a way in which people reach out to someone. It sends a message of, I found this interesting and thought we could talk about it together. Expressing a concern, which is another really big one. This may show up while reading the news or having someone ask you about a recent problem you had. When someone brings up a concern, they're indirectly letting you know, I care about you. However, a bit of connection shows up. We can do one of three things in response. Turn towards, respond to the bid and connect, turn away, respond to the bid angrily or aggressively, or turn away, ignore the bid. We are in a time where we need to attempt to connect with one another, take care of each other, etc. So these are examples. Now, there are some other things that can be true, which is that people can take advantage of this. People can walk all over you. People can treat you as their sort of like emotional support and, hold on one second, constantly expect it from you, right? Especially if you got really close to somebody during a time of like real emotional difficulty for them and you provided a lot of support, they might get used to that dynamic. And this can be a common complaint I see, especially from young men who are like, I was there for this woman during all these things. I thought we were going to date. And she really, I think, just thinks of me as a friend and constantly wants me to give her emotional support. Well, one thing that you could ask is like, does this emotional support go both ways? Do I feel like I can actually turn to them for emotional support on things? Do you talk to them about how you feel about different things? Can you share your worries and concerns with them? If not, that's not very like balanced friendship. You can maybe work on it, or you might want to talk to them about it, or it might be a good indication that it's a very, one directional friendship. Other things could be like, do they treat you like you are their, errand person? Do they kind of expect you're always going to be there to help in these sorts of ways, in ways you didn't actually want to sign up for? Remember, we talked about a long time ago that a lot of things that sometimes we run into difficulties with boundaries and things because at the beginning of getting to know people is when we really start to adjust our consent frameworks for how we interact with each other. And so whatever people get used to at the beginning can be a lot harder to change later and will feel more of a conflict later. Whereas if I am not actually that comfortable with, say, people just like coming in and going through my stuff, right? Like, let's say I want some privacy, but the first time someone comes over, I'm like surprised. They just like went into my room and started looking through my closet. I don't think to say anything because I'm just kind of like, oh, that's funny. I probably should say something, just like, hey man, why are you going through my closet? Or what's up with that? Or like, hey, please stay out of my bedroom, whatever. Because otherwise it might be harder to change that later. Now, obviously, there are some people who are like really bad with boundaries and surprisingly struggle with that even, where it seems sort of developmentally mismatched, but you can still express that. It just gets harder to change these things later. And so things that you can do if the friendship really stays one-sided and you want it to become less one-sided, sometimes what can happen is being less available, not just being a doormat and responding to literally every bid the person has and everything and saying like, no, I also want to make time for me. I also like, you might recognize, hey, it's not good for me emotionally to constantly respond to every time this person needs something from me, especially because I know that they don't do the same thing for me and they're not really willing to. So I think that I need to take some more time for myself. I don't want to totally not be friends with this person anymore, but it's okay for me to kind of step away a little bit. And sometimes it does work out that is the thing that once someone starts to sense your absence, they can realize how much they value your presence, and then they might invest more, especially if you've kind of already talked about it. I don't recommend like trying to play this as some sort of like mind game, like let's test it out and see. Try to talk to people about it. It's always better to do that. You're more likely to be successful just being like gentle, but actually talking with people about things, because most people are paying that much attention. Okay, so a couple other resources I want to share. There's more articles on how to, once you have a relationship, maintain it. The Gottman Institute has a lot of really good things. And then there is also this one here, this little BBC article on like self-marrying, but which is not to say that I feel like you should all just, give up and marry yourselves or whatever. That's not at all what I mean. What I mean to say is, I don't agree with RuPaul when RuPaul says, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anybody else? Because I think that plenty of us genuinely love other people and still struggle with self-acceptance because we live in a world constantly telling us not to accept ourselves. But I do think that somebody who takes good care of themselves lives their life in a way that respects their own existence and is engaged with life and engaged with the world. When you've got your own kind of stuff going on, it does, I think, make you more attractive to someone as a potential friend or romantic partner. If I were looking to date somebody, yeah, exactly, Krellin. Because we see lots of great things in other people we don't see in ourselves. Come on, RuPaul, stop being so problematic. Yeah, like I really disagree with that statement RuPaul has. There are many things that I disagree with RuPaul about, especially transphobia. But, that one is, I think, the thing, RuPaul's like tagline, basically. And I just am like, there's a lot of reasons why that's not actually a very accurate statement. But I understand the spirit of what RuPaul is trying to say. And so that's why I brought it up. So if I was looking to date somebody, for example, who would I be more likely to be attracted to? Somebody who has really backed away from life, is, really has no hobbies and no interests, just does their job and spends the rest of their time watching TV. And I'm not like that. And that's not how I want to live my life. Maybe there are people who like that and that's really what makes them feel good and they like that kind of cozy comfort, consistency. But for me, do I want to date somebody who their only hobby is, say, watching TV and that's it? Or do I feel like, would I be more interested in somebody who has hobbies, has friends, maybe not a lot of friends, but has some friends, actually does stuff, like takes themselves out, goes and does things for themselves, and has a life going on? That's a lot more attractive because that tells me I'm not going to be this person's entire world. I'm not going to be the one thing. I don't want to be the manic pixie dream girl. A lot of people have wanted me to be, especially when I was younger, because, I often had pixie cuts and I'm tiny and a little bit insane. And a lot of people find that very attractive. And yeah, there is a good video I want to share with you all, and it's like a little poem. Let me see if I can find it. This one here. I'm going to just pause it as soon as it starts because I want you all to get to enjoy it. And it is just called How to Be Alone. And it is really good because it's basically about that sort of self-love, which is that you can't wait for someone else to come along to fix your life or to make it interesting or for your life to start. You just got to live your life because there is also the truth that you may never meet somebody. This is the thing that, like, you may never meet somebody, or you meet the love of your life and they die. You meet the love of your life and they're married to somebody else and they're not polyamorous and they have no interest in being so. You meet the love of your life and they're, not attracted to you. Whatever. These things can happen. You might never meet somebody. Do you then want the story of your life to be, I'm so sad that I never met anybody, that I'm just kind of gonna mark time until I die? Or do you want it to be, I went and had a fantastic fucking adventure of a life and loved it and it was good and I didn't need somebody else to make it good? Because I'm much more interested in knowing that I'm going to be a part of somebody's life and that we're going to make a cool life together than this person, that I'm going to like save this person by coming into their life, that I'm going to be the thing that brings meaning to it. That's, having been in relationships where that was the case, it never went well and it always got really unhealthy and was genuinely harmful to me and the other person most of the time. So yeah, work on making your life good and giving yourself the opportunities to meet people, have hobbies, take good care of yourself. Don't view other people as a prize to be won. Okay, so now with a little bit more time, I don't know if we're going to actually get to playing any Stardew today. Sorry, there's so many things to talk about. It's a fancy day. I have a book. It is controversial and it is fine. There is just, where is it? What do I want? I don't need this. Give me 1 second. Window capture is what I need. There we go. Okay, I don't know why it was so hard for me to get this up. I'm gonna give me a second to just resize it a little bit. So this book here is called He's Not That Into You. It is for sure in many ways outdated and a bit sexist. That being said, there is still genuinely good advice in here. And I think for many people, this is a book that's aimed at heterosexual women. I, however, think that men should read this book too. A nice joke, Rodden. Why do I say men should read this book too? Because it is a thing where a lot of guys will basically not do anything to give any indication to someone they're interested in dating that they are interested in dating to them, and kind of expect them to just intuit it. And that doesn't work. And I know this because I've had a lot of guy friends who did that, and I've had them read this book and they were just like, oh, damn. Oh, damn. Yeah. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. I just want to actually look at basically the chapter titles and a couple of little excerpts, because I think that it's pretty self-explanatory. So the table of contents here, he's not that into you if he's not asking you out. What does that mean? Yes, women can ask men out, but if a guy really likes you, on some level, he will probably give you an indication that he wants to date you or that he's interested in you. Now, why do I want to talk about that in particular? Well, especially in a world where we've taught people to kind of like do all this like pickup artist shit, I guarantee you that any guy who does pickup artist shit, the second he meets a woman who he genuinely loves and really wants to keep in his life, he will stop doing that. Or, unless he's an idiot, basically. Why? Because if you genuinely like somebody and genuinely care about them as a person and want them in your life, you're not going to treat them like shit. And you're not going to, if you view them as a full person, not something to be controlled or to be managed, if you're going to try. It's not necessarily saying that people are going to be good at this, but they're going to try. So I'm not against, I'm the person who initiated dating with Charlie. I asked Charlie to marry me. This is not to say that it has to be very gendered in this way. It is to say that if you really like somebody, male or female or non-binary, whatever, give each other indications of this. So if you're a guy and you like somebody, you got to actually ask them out. Even though, yes, there are plenty of women and non-binary people who will be the person to initiate, a lot of people still are influenced by heteronormativity. And so if you don't give them any indication that you like them, they're going to just assume that you don't. And the more time that goes by in that way, the more likely they are to say, okay, this person has no interest in me. I might have been interested in them, but it didn't seem to go that way. I'm going to sort of disconnect from that option in my brain and move on. And this is where I think sometimes people get into this whole friend zone thing where they're like, it seemed at first like there was maybe some potential or some spark there, but nobody made a move. And then that gave the indication basically to both parties, oh, I guess this isn't happening. And sometimes once you move on, it's hard to bring that feeling back up. Okay, he's not that into you if he's not calling you. If you like somebody, pay attention to them. Do not play some weird-ass game of hard to get. Now, this does not mean call them 50 times a day and want to know everything about their life and everything that they're doing. That's not okay. That's way too much. But like pickup artist shit will say like you got to make it so they never are sure if you like them or not. And you can't be like pussy whipped. You got to like be separate and do all this stuff. No. That might work on some people, but it's going to create a precarious relationship and it's not going to be good for long-term sustainability of that relationship. You think that shit's going to continue to work when you're in your 70s? No, it's not. That person will just have left you at some point or have died from the stress of being with you. Okay? This is the thing you should always keep in your head. Is the way I conduct my life now, if I don't change anything, do I think I will still be satisfied when I'm in my 70s? Will it still continue to get me the things that I want when I'm no longer hot in the eyes of the people I want to have sex with? Yep, exactly, Krellin. I wonder how many potential relationships I've lost out on because of the whole you need to be hard to get thing. Because I move on after a single no. Exactly. I trust it when people say no. When people have rejected me, I don't try to fix that. The one exception is Charlie and I were dating. Long distance was hard. There were other things that were complicating it. There was somebody else who was trying to make the relationship difficult. We tried polyamory and it wasn't really working for us. There was all of these things going on. So we broke up. And then I was just like, this isn't that they don't want to be with me. It's just that this relationship as it is right now is not sustainable for either of us. So I'm going to work hard to try to change the situation because I really want this relationship to work. And it did, but there was no guarantee of that. There's no guarantee, right? And Charlie would have been well within his rights to just be like, no, I'm good. So playing hard to get, what that can mean is, don't just go and like chase after everybody who shows you the little bit of kindness or attention. If you feel yourself doing that, maybe take some time to work on your like self-esteem and your self-love and, to make sure you're giving yourself some of those things that you need, right? When people are so desperate for like unconditional, unwavering love that they're willing to look for it wherever they can get it, it breaks my heart because people forget you can give that to yourself anytime you want. You can give yourself unwavering, unconditional love. Honestly, more than anyone else will ever be able to. Why? Because shit's not unconditional, generally speaking. And like, it's complicated. We often look for that, but just give it to yourself. Just really give yourself that love first. And, playing hard to get, what that could be instead is like, don't chase after everybody who shows you the smallest bit of kindness. Don't necessarily like, how do I want to say this? Because like I'm not gonna try to go with the whole like slut shaming nonsense, but like decide, are you having sex with someone on a first date because you actually want to have sex with them or because you think that's what they want you to do? Or you think that's like what's going to give you the points or whatever. Like I've had periods of time in my life where I was like, I just want to be a slut for a little while. Like I just want to have sex with people. I want to have a good time. I don't want to have a long-term relationship. I just want to like have my slut era. And that was good for me. That's not how I want to live my whole life, of course, at least for me. I mean, I'm married. I chose to not continue to live my life that way, which is why I say, of course. But yeah, I mean, like, you got to decide, am I having sex casually with this person because I think that's what is expected of me, or it's because what I actually want? If it's what you actually want, keep on doing it. Otherwise, let me take a step back. Okay. Okay. And Aradin, you said, I've never thought I was hot, so that is easy. There is a difference between playing hard to get and taking some time to think things through. Exactly. Okay. So the next one, and like, don't seem overeager. That's the other thing. Like, this is a balance between showing people that you're interested when you're interested and being overeager. Because the overeager thing can make people feel uncomfortable. It can make people think, what is going on in this person's life that they're so desperate for me to come into it? Or like, assuming closeness too quickly, like we talk about in friendship processes. If you try to push it too fast, it can be really alienating. And remember also, creepy is the sensation we get when we're getting mixed signals for both safe and unsafe simultaneously. And so trying to force it or like being too keen too quickly, just chill. Show genuine interest, but also be a little chill. And that's even if you both are like super yandere, like immediately obsessed with each other. Like you want to kind of match the intensity. That is a skill. That is like maybe a trick, I'm telling you, which is just like, be true, be honest, express how you genuinely feel. Don't tell someone you're in love with them on a first date. Even if you've like been pining after them for years or whatever, like, that's intense. You got to give it time for a person to be ready to hear that. Okay. He's not that into if he's not having sex with you or if he's having sex with someone else. These ones, one, ace people exist. Two, polyamory is a thing. But the main idea that this person is trying to talk about is like, sometimes people will seem like they're really interested in you, will give you regular indications that they are. However, there is an incongruity between what they say and what they do. So that's what these chapters are actually trying to talk about. 3, 4, and 5 really are just talking about these incongruities. That he doesn't want to marry you. I mean, like, of course, like I said, this book is controversial. There are some things that are very like outdated about it, but the actual core idea, and this is a very short book, it's only 81 pages. Like, I do actually recommend people read this because if you get past the things that are cringe, like, the core of it is good. It's like the same with that book Covenant Marriage by the guy who wrote the 5 love languages, which nobody's read. Covenant Marriage is like way more direct and honest with the fact that this person is a very hardcore conservative Christian. But that book actually has good advice because covenant marriages are marriages that are like a certain type of legal marriage in some states where you actually cannot get divorced. And if you're in that kind of situation and shit hits the fan and your relationship kind of falls apart, how do you make that not miserable for the rest of your life for both of you? His book on that is like actually got good advice, and a lot of it is about emotional bids, being careful of your regard for each other, being careful not to let like resentment build up, being honest about the fact that sexuality and, libido and stuff naturally fluctuate over a person's life. And so, like, while you might be really in sync at the beginning of a relationship, it is actually what is likely to happen that as your relationship continues on, how much sex you have will go down because everybody's got ups and downs and they don't tend to sync up. And there'll be intersecting moments, and those intersecting moments are great. But if you put too much pressure on yourself to say, like, we fixed it, we're gonna just have all of the sex like we did when we were 19, and we're gonna do, like, no, that's too much pressure. You just gotta be real about it. Talk about, like, how you can build other types of intimacy, etc., etc. I don't remember how I got on that part, but okay. A lot of these really talk about good stories. This is a really good book. Chapter 11 has also really good advice. I wanted to click on it, but let me get to chapter 11. Because I want to show you some of this. Because it's good advice genuinely for everybody to read. And there's a lot of stories and like examples. It's just really also like if your partner is not actually interested in like making you feel good, including if you're engaging in sex with each other, That's part of what he's talking about. Like if the person never actually wants to be a part of that with you, maybe there's something up. If you both are sexual and want to engage in sex with each other. Okay, let me get to chapter 11. Sorry, this is not. I thought that the PDF was more functionality than it actually has. It's 10. Yeah, this one, if he's married and other insane variations of being unavailable, these are lots of really good stories. There are lots of like questions, and he really talks about these principles. I really do recommend this book. Just you got to set aside the things that are not totally modern, because a lot of the core advice is good, which is basically like, is the person actually showing you that they're interested in you? Do they make you feel good? Are they prioritizing spending time with you? Is there incongruity? So then the reverse is, are you showing to someone you're interested in dating that you're interested in dating them? Are you actually prioritizing making space for them in your life? Are you actually interacting with them in a way that feels good and where you make the other person feel good too? And, are you being incongruous in your behavior? If you're saying to someone, oh my goodness, you're my whole world, but like every weekend you're fucking off with the boys to go fishing, I don't know about that. Right, and becoming aromantic as well. I mean, that is definitely a thing. There are lots of people who are aromantic who just don't experience romantic attraction. But also, I'm very thankful that I don't have to date anymore, because I would have a hard time being romantically attracted to a lot of people. Okay, so chapter 11, he's just not that into you if he's a selfish jerk, a bully, or a really big freak. So I think the selfish jerk or a bully is one of those things that comes back to what I was talking about with some of this pickup artist stuff, because a lot of the pickup artist stuff is about how to be a selfish jerk or a bully and manipulate people to get the thing you think you want, which is like sex or whatever, or like an end of loneliness. But actually these things it's not sustainable. It's really just not sustainable. And if it does sustain, it's not a good relationship. It's not going to give you the things you think you want, unless you're actually just like an asshole who just thinks of a romantic partner as like a tool for being like a fleshlight or something. I don't know. Whatever. Okay. Let's read one of these examples. If you really love someone, you want to do things to make that person happy. Okay. He's got so much good in him. He really does. I just wish he wouldn't tell me to shut up all the time. Yeah, that's a problem. Try not to ignore it. I know. He's got so many other great qualities. That's why you fell in love with him in the first place. I know you wouldn't fall in love with an asshole, but here's the trick. Forget about him and his good qualities. Even forget about his bad ones. Forget about all of his excuses and what he promises. Ask yourself one question only. Is he making you happy? People are complicated. They're a mixed bag of lovable and dysfunctional qualities. That's why they are so darn confusing. That's why trying to figure them out is a waste of time. Is he making you happy? I don't mean some of the time, on rare occasions, not that often. But the good still outweighs the bad. Does he make it clear in his actions every day that your happiness is important to him? If the answer is no, cut him loose and find a man with a higher good count. So this goes both ways, for sure, right? Like this is the thing I want to stress about this book, is a lot of these things go both ways. And it is definitely a thing that I think has just got good relationship advice. If you like somebody, you should want them to have a good experience of their own life. And it cannot just be an extension of your own pleasure, happiness, enjoyment, whatever. You got to actually want that person to be happy in ways intrinsic to them. And so if you don't take time to actually figure out, hey, what is it that makes this person feel good? And am I helping to make sure that person has access to these things in the everyday? A lot of it's small, like a hug before you go to work, right? Like Charlie and I often want to sleep a little bit later than Charlie. I'm really not a morning person. And I sometimes get up with Charlie. I don't always, but one of the things we've talked about is before Charlie leaves, even if I'm still asleep, I like it if he comes in and says goodbye and gives me a hug. And that's like a little ritual we have to like interact with each other at the start of the day every day, even if I stayed up way later doing work and I need to sleep later or whatever. And we also take time to thank each other every day for different ways that we support each other. We never want it to become something that's just like routine or expected to the point we don't notice it anymore. And we really take stock of all of the things that we do for each other. Exactly, Rod. It starts the day on a good note. And, you know, we don't do weird passive aggressive shit. We really are just dedicated to the idea of like, how can we have the best experience of life with each other? And that's not to say that we were just like born these kinds of people. This is active choices that Charlie and I both made along the way to cultivate those things in ourselves and to be that kind of person for many different reasons. But as this says, everybody is a mixture of good and bad qualities and things that are really wonderful and things that take effort. Relationships take work, but what that means is they take investment and prioritization, not that it should feel like work. If it's making you feel miserable, don't do it. Okay. Let's read another one. Dear Greg, my boyfriend is selfish. He says he loves me. He does include me in his life. We are close to each other's families, and he is a very good man in many ways. We've been living together for 4 years, and he never shares household responsibilities. Doesn't put any effort into going on nice dates with me. Doesn't make a big deal about my birthday. Never brings me flowers. Won't walk the dog. Rarely compliments me. Doesn't thank me when I make a nice dinner for him and his friends. Isn't that affectionate, and doesn't want to go on nice vacations with me. We talk about it all the time, and he swears he is trying to change, but his changes are pretty imperceptible. The question is, can he really love me as much as he says he does and be this much of a dick? Paula. So, like, immediately, this is one of those things where I think there's a lot of sunk cost here. You've spent all this time getting close to each other's families, etc. But this is one of the biggest things. One, just like selfishly, if you want sex, for example, you will get more sex if your partner is not exhausted and frustrated and bitter. They're not going to want to have sex with you. One of the best ways to make sure is share the housework with them. Like genuinely like sharing the daily life responsibilities that suck and nobody enjoys doing and take time and energy. Being equal partners in that. And it often feels equal, but I guarantee you, if you actually add things up, they're not that equal. Makes a big difference. If someone makes these bids, I would love to go out on nice dates. Doesn't have to be all the time, but on occasion, could you plan a surprise and take me out? That's a bid. And if the person never wants to meet that, it's, you know, doesn't make a big deal about my birthday, never brings me flowers, won't walk the dog. I mean, if it's your dog, both of you, this person, and it sounds like it is, definitely needs to take equal responsibility for taking care of it. Doesn't thank me when I make a nice dinner for him and his friends. This just says entitled and like doesn't actually appreciate. And maybe, you know, we can armchair, you know, psychoanalyze. Maybe this person just hates himself so much, you know, whatever, like wants to self-sabotage. It doesn't matter. The material reality is the thing that we're interacting with. Carlin, you say, oh my God, do not surprise me with a night out. I mean, yeah, this is important to this person, but not to every person. Aradan, I'm trying to change, i.e., this is the excuse I'm using to justify my actions. Okay, so let's read this response. Dear Addicted, you've got to be kidding me. Take your letter, hold it up, and read it to yourself and a friend. If you can't figure out the answer, call the cops because someone's had their brain stolen. P.S. The answer to your question is no. People who are in love with each other generally try to be nice. Some even get a kick out of treating their mate well and trying to make their life better. He may think he loves you, and maybe he does, but he's really bad at it. And it's exactly the same result as if he just wasn't that into you. So this is exactly it. The material reality. What is the actual effect of this? You know, I like surprises. I've communicated this to Charlie, and I also recognize that Charlie and I are incredibly forgetful, scatterbrained people with poor senses of time. So, how does Charlie surprise me with things? Well, he brings me gifts and chocolate and flowers every once in a while. He occasionally does nice things for me when he remembers. I do not expect him to like plan a romantic getaway. Like, that would be cool, but if I want that, I can plan that. And I do plan that for us sometimes because I want and like those things. It's about balance, right? If Charlie's incredibly affectionate. Charlie really does a lot for me. We share in the responsibilities. We're really sweet to each other. We engage with each other. We're super supportive of each other. So much of those things are there. Okay. Try not to be 4 years into a relationship when it suddenly dawns on you that the person you're with is a big selfish jerk. Chances are Jerkface has been trying to show you who they are since day one. Next one, it's just the way he was brought up excuse. Dear Greg, my boyfriend of the year is perfect in every way. He just happened to grow up in a very dysfunctional family with only one other brother and a crazy mother. I am from a very big, close, loving family. He does not ever want me to spend time with my family, and when given the choice, he will always stay home rather than go for a visit. When I do take him with me to family dinners, he's sullen and unfriendly. We talk about it, and he says he just isn't into family. It's hard to imagine sharing a future with someone like this, but at the same time, isn't how we get along alone more important? And I think eventually he would get used to my family and come around, don't you? They're really nice people. So first of all, you can't build a relationship based off of who you think they might become. That's a losing game right there. You don't get in a relationship to try to change people or fix people. Don't do that shit. It's fucked up. But also, like, people don't change that much a lot of the time. They can, it's possible, but it takes a lot and it takes a long time. If you really love having a big family and being close to them and your partner is not at all into that, there's nothing wrong with your partner. But if this is both fundamental aspects of who you are and how you want to interact with the world, and they're very incompatible, it is unlikely that those things are going to change. So you're better off probably being with somebody who also wants the big family that you're all super close to and not trying to fit into things that don't match. Rodney said, if someone really wants to surprise me, that is okay, but don't do it with plans. Yeah. Krellin, isn't how we are alone more important? Not if you want to have a family with them, which I'm betting this person does. Exactly. So this gets into that point of people get afraid of breaking up. It's really sad because, like, sometimes breaking up is actually the most loving thing you can do because it shows that you respect both of your time. It shows that you respect a lot of things sometimes. And if you, especially early in the relationship, realize you've got these really big incompatibilities, it's okay for them to be deal breakers. It's okay to say, I'm going to try to find somebody else. Now, again, this book does talk about it. Technically, there are more women in the world than there are men. So even if everybody were straight and everybody got married, there would be some women who would not ever get married because there wouldn't be enough people left over. There's also the issue that there are lots of people who are not straight. There's the issue, which is not an issue, but in terms of like everybody finding a partner and pure sort of gender balance, that's what I mean. Not everybody's straight. Not everybody is interested in relationships. Not everybody is interested in getting married or having a long-term relationship. And a lot of people are not ready for and will never be ready for that kind of relationship. So that means, this book talks about it, some people will have to, if they really, really want to prioritize having a relationship more than anything, be chill to settle. But don't settle for shit that makes you miserable. You can settle for, this wasn't the fairy tale thing I imagined, but it's good, it's supportive, I enjoy enough of this to be good with it. Also, I'm almost done, Charlie. Yeah, is Krellin birth rates are pretty close to 50-50, but for a number of reasons, a lot of boys die in infancy. A lot of it has to do with like oxygen deprivation during birth, and it seems as though estrogen is protective of the brain. I don't really know though. That was like 20 years ago that I read the research and why. But I think it's like 51% birth rate of women to 50% or female to male, but um and yes, women do tend to live longer, but yeah, the birth rates are not exactly 50-50. Okay. So all that being said, it's okay to be alone. First of all, you do not have to be with anybody. And it's also, yeah, I don't know. Okay, let's just read what this guy says. Dear all in the family, so your boyfriend is perfect in every way except he's not into your family. Wow, that's a pretty big exception. Sure, he's got kind of a good excuse to be selfish because that's all this really is about, really. A lot of people don't list on their top 10 favorite things to do spending time with other people's family. But aren't you hoping one day to include him in that family? In fact, back in the old days, I don't know exactly when that was, but you know what I mean. Your family would have had to approve of him before he even got to meet you. So don't sell out your family for this dude. If he was really into you and truly planning on sticking around, he would be doing a little tap dance for your awesome family every time he saw them and perhaps baking them a little cake as well. So I think this is a bit extreme, but like if someone's family is really important to them, it's just good manners to like, you go to the family holidays, you play nice for a little while, you put on a show, and then you complain about it on the ride home, or you make the jokes with each other, or you like, it's not even that often. And if it's really important to one person, it can be nice, you know. He doesn't have to love your CD collection. He doesn't have to love your shoes, but any good, mature guy better make an attempt to love your friends and family, especially when they're great. The It's not always going to be like this excuse. Dear Greg, I'm dating a guy in medical school. He's overworked, overtired, and gets angry easily. So this is always one of those things where people want to talk about how like, oh, I reacted in this way because it was just an extreme situation. And while that might be true, that's still how this person reacts in extreme situations, like super stressful things. And super stressful things are going to come up in life. And so if the way somebody reacts to being incredibly stressed is to like lay into you with a bunch of insults and be like really rude and make you more miserable, that basically tells you probably when other big stresses come up in life, it's you're going to also have to manage that person's feelings versus, you know, yeah, which is one of the reasons why like I've talked with Charlie about how like both Charlie and I can get a little grumpy when we're really sleep deprived, which I think is really normal. But I want to be mindful of that if we have kids, because especially in the early days, you're going to be very sleep deprived. And I don't want to be so grumpy with each other that it adds to stresses. So that doesn't mean that like it's inherently a problem because we're willing to acknowledge it, accept it, be honest about it, and talk about strategies to mitigate it. And one of the main things we've talked about is like we just don't ask each other a bunch of questions when we're really tired because neither of our brains can totally handle it. Exactly, Rod. And did they not realize that's probably going to be the same during residency and when they're an actual doctor? Uh, He yells at me when I wake him up by mistake, and he recently screamed at me because he felt I was bothering him when he was in the middle of studying for some big exam. So this is, you can set boundaries around this. If you accidentally wake each other up, you don't have to sleep in the same room. If you're in the middle of studying for a big exam, it's good to communicate about that before you get into that situation. And like Charlie and I have had times where I say, like, when I have my noise canceling headphones on, do not try to get my attention. Or like if there's something, unless it's an emergency, and if there's something you really want to talk about, like you can send me an email, and when I have a moment, but I'm not necessarily ready to come out of my workspace, I'll check my email, and then I might choose, like we talk about strategies for that, because we've had times where we both need to get a lot of stuff done and it's stressful. We don't get angry at each other. We think about strategies to reduce the risk of it being stressful for either of us. Okay, the thing is, I know that this is just temporary because he's in medical school. He wasn't like this in the beginning when we just started dating and he hadn't started school yet. He was really sweet and thoughtful. Every once in a while, he'll feel bad and apologize and tell me how much pressure he's under. I know the real guy is going to come back, Greg. Denise. P.S. Besides, I always wanted to marry a doctor. Okay, dear old yeller, I don't care if he's studying to become the next Messiah. There's no reason to yell at anyone ever unless you are screaming, look out for that bus. And this is it right there. If you let your anger get the better of you and mistreat the people you care about, you got to work on that shit, because there's no reason to do that. And it's not temporary. People who yell are people with anger issues who need help. People who yell are people who think they're entitled to yell. Or they're people who think, not necessarily that they're entitled to yell, but that yelling gets them what they want. That is an effective tool. And maybe they were taught that, maybe that's what they've learned through experience, but they got to stop it and got to work on it. Because, yeah, it might be an effective tool in some ways, but does it actually create long-term change in the behavior? No, it creates anxiety, stress, and avoidance. That's literally what's happening here. This person isn't saying, my boyfriend yelling at me because I accidentally woke him up made it so I never did it again, because that's literally, not possible given the structure or whatever. All it does is make it so this person is so stressed out, they're writing to someone they've never met for support and for help, and wondering if this relationship is even worth it. So this is what you see a lot in like domestic violence perpetrator rehabilitation programs, is you have to ask the person, like, did the things that you did that gave you control over your family actually give you control? Or are you now, in a court-ordered program and not allowed to see your kids and divorced and having to just like, did it actually get you what you wanted? No. It may temporarily seem like it does, but it doesn't produce good long-term results. And if you're on the receiving end of these things, cut your losses and leave. Okay. And it's not temporary. People who yell are people with anger issues who need help. People who yell are people who think they're entitled to yell. Hey, hot stuff. Do you want to be that couple? The couple where the guy yells at his wife all the time? Even better, do you want him to be that dad? I don't think so. Don't wait around for Mr. Hyde to turn back into Dr. Jekyll. Go meet a man who really knows what it's like to take care of people. So as you can see here, there are lots of different things. The other part of this book that I think is really useful to talk about is the solutions section. I think that this book is good. I mean, it's got shortcomings, but I think overall it's important. So this summary here, what you should have learned in this chapter: life is hard enough as it is without choosing someone difficult to share it with. On the flip side, make sure you're not making the other person's life more difficult. Don't treat them like they're your maid, your parent, your caretaker all the time, with the exception of medical situations, disability, where there might actually be a caretaker relationship. That is its own unique situation that requires its own unique strategies to make sustainable. You deserve to be with someone who is nice to you all the time. You have to be nice to them too. There's never a reason to shout at someone unless they're in immediate danger. Freaks should remain in the circus, not in your apartment. I don't know what this one is talking about. You already have one asshole, you don't need another. Make space in your life for the glorious things you deserve. Have faith. What other choice is there? Okay. So, if you're in a relationship that you suspect is not good for you, but you're not sure, do this simple exercise. Take out a tape recorder, tell the story of your relationship into it, play it out loud. Imagine that it is your best friend in the whole world is telling you that story instead of you. Would you want better for them? If it's impossible for you to think you deserve better, try to at least believe one of your friends who thinks you deserve better just long enough to get out of the relationship. So this is not to say that anytime you have questions or worries about like how is this going to go, that means it's actually just a sign that you should leave. But there are some things where it's just like the amount of work that it would take to fix this situation is not going to be useful, because if the situation were actually possible to fix, the person who you're trying to work with would be an equal partner in fixing it with you. Arati said, I don't know if I really trust this guy either, given some of his responses or the way he phrased them. If you mean the author, I mean, I think that this book actually has a lot of really good advice that is maybe not the most smoothly perfect self-help book, nonviolent communication, absolutely modern way of saying things, but like the core crux, a lot of it is, does the person actually show you in their actions, not just their words, that they respect you? Do you feel good in their relationship? And like, here are some things to think through that you might not realize are also disrespectful. Okay, so let's stop here for today. And we will talk a little bit more about romance and some more positives next time. And we'll get back to friendship next week. Thank you all for hanging out with me. I know we didn't play any game today, but there was so much to talk about, and it was a Valentine's Day special. And I really enjoy hanging out with you all. I think that there is a lot of really wonderful things to talk about. And I hope you all have a good rest of your week. Check out our schedule. I think it's here. Yes, our calendar. We've got some good things coming up. We've also got a Patreon, and we're on all of social media if you want to follow us on that too. I hope you all have a really great week, and I will talk to you on Sunday when we have a special guest. All right, bye.